Number 10. Louise. Louise is not a major character in terms of being a huge mutant or key villain to mutants in the current series, but she is someone who will likely end up becoming a close friend and ally of Wolverine's. She first appeared in issue number 1 of the newest Wolverine series that started in 2020. I actually remember reading that first issue when I was in New York City right before the world went crazy. Oh my, what a time. Memories. Louise is a member of the Night Guard, and while she dropped off after issue 1, as we keep coming back to Dracula and the vampire nations going ons in the Wolverine series, she too has resurfaced. Louise was given a suit by Forge to help slow her transformation into a vampire after she and her Night Guard were attacked and either killed or turned. She once more teamed up with Logan as they went head to head with Dracula and his loyal subjects, and likely she'll be back again as this slow burning story continues to be developed. In fact, I think this is going to be like the big story before the end of this current Wolverine series, whenever we get there. Number 9. Cyclops Lass. So Cyclops Lass might not be one of the most important characters on this list, but I still think she is a character you should get to know because, well, she's just a cool character. I really like Cyclops Lass. Cyclops Lass is Beatrice Buddy Bartholomew and is the leader of the Children of the Atom. By the way, it took me a minute to realize when I first heard of this fan-composed mutant-inspired teen hero team's name that their group name was another phrase used for mutants and even the X-Men back in the day. It's pretty cool when you realize that. Neat stuff. Cyclops Lass appears to have powers similar to the X-Men member and often leader, Cyclops, but in reality we learned that it was actually alien tech which gave her team their powers, allowing them to appear like mutants and like some of their favorite X-Men members. Still, Buddy is a cool character, and while Children of the Atom has ended, I do hope we get to see more of its team members. Buddy made her first cameo appearance in Marvel's Voices issue number 1 and her full appearance in Children of the Atom issue number 1. Number 8. Cosmar. Cosmar is one of the new mutants, if that makes sense. She first appeared in issue number 9 of the newest series from 2020. Currently there are 2 different groups of new mutants in that series, the one based on the mutant island nation of Krakoa, who are truly feeling those outcast vibes right now, and currently are like the Shadow King's lost mutant kids, and the other traditional new mutant team who is more focused on space adventures and other international exploits. When Cosmar's powers first manifested, it resulted in the death of her parents. Her powers cause her to suck people into her nightmares, as she creates a reality warping sphere surrounding her. All those who touch or interact with it run the risk of being sucked in. And I believe Forge actually made her a suit as well, as Forge is just making everybody little things to help them with their powers, to help her sort of control those powers so that they wouldn't be so disastrous. Number 7. Gimmick. Gimmick is a new mutant who first appeared and had her powers manifest in Children of the Atom. She was the one member of the team who actually ended up making it to Krakoa due to the fact that she was a real mutant, in addition to also being a major fangirl of the X-Men. But aside from her being a mutant, Carmen Cruz is also good friends with the fellow Children of the Atom, with Cyclops Lass, aka Buddy, probably being her best friend on the team and also her secret crush who she's in love with. Another thing that I love about Carmen is that she also is the person that makes all the costumes on the team, and she's super into cosplay, which I just think is like super cool and super cute. We don't have a lot of characters in the comics that are cosplayers, so I really liked that element. Gimmick's powers appeared initially to be similar to Gambit's, but this was all done using alien technology. In reality, when Carmen's mutant powers manifested, it was revealed that they were shape-shifting in nature and also granted her a healing factor. Carmen made her first cameo appearance in 2020 in Marvel's Voices issue 1, but would appear fully in the first issue of Children of the Atom the following year in 2021. Also, when she did have her Gambit powers, it was pretty cool because she was like throwing basically little like clothing pins, if that makes sense, at people, which I love. Number 6. Maxime and Manon. Maxime and Manon are relatively new characters and mutants who appeared within the last year, but we also now potentially have a different version of them in the current X books. They're likely from a different continuity due to what we learned during the Dawn of X period of the current line. There's like a version of them I think that's like 616, and then there's a version of them that doesn't actually have a reality number officially yet, but yes. Maxime and Manon, as we see them in the current timeline, are a brother and sister who together can heavily manipulate and warp the minds of others. Maxime can manipulate the emotions of his target, and Manon can manipulate and alter their memories, making the two a powerful duo when working in tandem. Maxime and Manon once served Ahab, being brainwashed into using their powers to make hounds for him. However, they would later be freed by Jean Grey, and Cable would convince her to look after them. Maxime and Manon are currently relevant because in the New Mutants series, they use their powers to make two humans attack one another and fight to the death, which is against Krakoan law. Ooh. However, nothing seems to have come from them taking this extreme action just yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes around at some point. Number 5. Bay the Blood Moon. Bay the Blood Moon is an awesome new character who made her first appearance in the Ten of Swords event back in the second main book from the event, Ten of Swords Stasis. She was one of the Arakko mutants who was called to compete in the Otherworld tournament, fighting to represent her nation. However, her fight actually ended up being a marriage. Basically, the Otherworld tournament was gloriously weird because it was being led by Saturnine, so we had traditional sword fights combined with lots of different kinds of battles, including puzzle-solving duels, food-eating competitions, dance-offs, and even an arranged marriage. However, it also all worked out as Cypher and Bay were seemingly both enamored with the other, as they were both masters of language and communication, but who struggled to understand one another, which fascinated them both, especially Cypher. They were both married and were each awarded a point, as it was considered a shared victory for both sides. Also, the art in the issue of Excalibur where they get married is just so good. It's so great. I love it. Number 4. Chen Zhao. Chen is not a mutant, nor is she an ally to mutant kind. She is just the opposite, their enemy. After coming up against the Marauders, trying to inspire mutant hate in her people as a public figurehead, billionaire, and anti-mutant activist, she ended up allying herself with Hum and his Verendi. Still hell-bent on destroying mutant kind's reputation as heroes, and now especially focused on doing harm to the band of mutant heroes that we know as the Marauders. Chen Zhao made her first appearance back in 2019 in Marauders issue 1, which once again, if you haven't read any of this comic, why not go back and start with that first issue in Chen's first appearance. Currently, Chen is Hum and his Verendi's White Bishop, and she's definitely a villain that I think is going to be more prominent and keep getting like more badass, which I love. Number 3. Dolores Ramirez. Dolores Ramirez is another non-mutant, but someone who is a very important character within and around the X-Men universe currently. She is the head of the X-Desk, and no, I don't mean that she worked with Jonathan Hickman to bring our current line of X-books to life. Within Earth 616, she is the one who presides over the United States government X-Desk, which monitors, keeps tabs on, and ultimately kind of spies on the mutant nation of Krakoa and its major players and political stratagems. The X-Desk is a department within the CIA. Dolores once offered to help fellow CIA agent Jeff Bannister, ally of Wolverine, who had been working with him, but he turned her down. Dolores was also one of the lucky few to get an invite to the Hellfire Gala and met with Storm in secret during her first appearance in Marauders issue 11, where she was rewarded for leaking some important information about poisoned medicine to the mutants. So while she's watching them, she also kind of seems pretty friendly. Number 2. Arakko. Arakko is both an island and a mutant, just like Krakoa. In fact, there was a time when both Krakoa and Arakko were joined together, but years ago they were separated. Arakko made their first appearance in Powers of X issue number 4, and later on we learn of all that went on there with the island, including the mutants who inhabited it and their connection to a vastly important mutant, Apocalypse. Following the Ten of Swords event, Arakko attempted to reunite with Krakoa, but both islands decided they were no longer really interested in one another, and the time had basically changed them. They reluctantly rejoined until a more suitable option was found for Arakko and the mutants of Krakoa. In planet-size X-Men, some of the mutants banded together under the direction of Magneto to terraform Mars and move Arakko and its inhabitants, the mutants of Arakko, to the now alive planet. That's what happens when you terraform a planet, you bring it to life again. I actually didn't know that Mars was considered a dead planet until I read Planet-Size X-Men, and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm also learning some science facts, which is great. Number 1. Genesis. One of the most badass of all the new characters we've gotten recently in the world of X-Men. Genesis is the long-lost wife of Apocalypse, who also was one of the main leaders of Arakko. She ended up fighting against Annihilation and becoming its new host in order to save her people, uniting both the Amenthi and the mutants of Arakko. Donning the mask, she became a leader of the Amenthi demon army, but also lost a part of herself in the process, as the Annihilation mask possessed and corrupted her. However, during the Ten of Swords tournament, she fought against her husband, Apocalypse, who managed to free her from the golden helm of Annihilation, taking it for himself. But Apocalypse's will proved strong enough to resist its influence, and the mask was then transformed by Saturnine into a much less influential and corrupting staff, which was then gifted to Genesis. Genesis made her first full appearance in the 2019 X-Men series in issue number 12. But we wouldn't learn that she was Annihilation until much later. Number 10. Cherub. Cherub is another of the Children of the Atom we got to know over the course of their 6-issue series. Cherub is Gabe Brathwaite. His powers, or the alien tech that allows him to appear to have powers, grant him the ability to fly with his winged suit and also allow him to emit sonic blasts. His powers are similar to Banshee and Angels. We also know that he is a fan of Forge and Dazzler, as he also went to go get Forge's autograph and attended a Dazzler concert with his friends and fellow Children of the Atom members. He makes his first appearance in Children of the Atom issue number 1. Number 9. Dr. James Boggs. Dr. James Boggs made his first appearance in Wolverine issue 11 of the current 2020 series run, volume 7 overall of Wolverine. Dr. James Boggs was a doctor who was recruited by the Vampire Nation to study Wolverine's blood and find a way to use it to eliminate vampires' weaknesses. He began to question the morality of what he was doing, but then he was forced to keep working for Dracula and the Vampire Nation when they transformed his lab assistant into a vampire, and made him one of his test subjects. However, this also inspired Dr. Boggs to betray Dracula, causing him to join forces with Omega Red, who was also coerced into working with Dracula and the Vampire Nation initially, but decided to betray them in order to truly join forces with his new home of Krakoa. In the end, Boggs was killed, but the attack against the Vampire Nation was successful. He will likely be one of the main casualties in what will become an all-out war against the Vampire Nation. Number 8. Nighty Nightcrawler. So I know that technically everyone still keeps calling him Daycrawler, but Jason Thomas himself insisted he wanted to be renamed Nighty Nightcrawler during his time on the Children of the Atom team, and so I'm going to honor his request. Nighty Nightcrawler it is. Jason is the younger stepbrother of Marvel Guy, aka Benny Thomas, and the two near the end of the series get to have a really touching moment where we learn that Benny really does care about his younger stepbrother, despite seemingly resenting his new family members and dynamic. Nighty Nightcrawler's powers also come from alien tech like most of the rest of the Children of the Atom, and like his name implies, they are similar to Nightcrawler Kurt Wagner's powers, allowing him to teleport and modified to produce Nightcrawler's signature BAMF sound. BAMF! Number 7. Marvel Guy. Marvel Guy is Benny Thomas, stepbrother to Jason and also a member of the Children of the Atom. While Benny is a big Wolverine fan, his powers given to him by alien tech are more comparable to Jean's, hence his name Marvel Guy. However, they are also a lot more restrictive than Jean's power set, which at this point allows her to do just about anything. Also, I don't know if you've noticed, but I also kind of feel like Marvel Guy's costume is a little bit more of an homage towards Wolverine, which I think is pretty cute. Like the other Children of the Atom, Marvel Guy has pieces of an older version of Magneto's helmet built in to protect him against telepaths, and he also possesses gloves which emit pheromones, allowing him to control and influence the minds of others. In most cases, he uses this to put his enemies to sleep, which I think is like the best way you could use those powers without being problematic, to be fair. Number 6. Jeff Bannister. Jeff Bannister is an ally and later friend of Wolverine's and a CIA agent who first appears in Wolverine issue number 1 of the current series and will likely show up again in the series in the future. He teamed up with Wolverine to learn the source of and put a stop to a deadly new that had surfaced called the pollen. Together, he and Wolverine track down the Flower Cartel and the Pale Girl, who was initially thought to be a shared hallucination brought on by the drug, though we'd later learn that she was actually a real person. Jeff Bannister also has a daughter who suffered from cancer. After Bannister worked with and befriended Wolverine, Logan was actually able to help his daughter by getting her immediate access to Krakoan medicines, which helped to cure her. Logan also gifted Bannister a Krakoan gate following their adventure together. Number 5. Pale Girl. While the Pale Girl might be a new character who hasn't appeared too much just yet, her role in the Wolverine story arc in which she appeared was pretty important, and the revelation about her character and just who she was also pretty important and will likely lead to a huge ramification later on in the world of X-Men. As I said before, the Pale Girl was initially thought to be some kind of shared hallucination for those who use the pollen, until she was caught on camera. We'd later learn that the Pale Girl was actually a mutant, Meredith Milley. Meredith Milley was a secret dealer of the pollen and the one who was responsible for delivering shipments to the Order of the X from the Flower Cartel, which seemed to be Russian in origin and tied to mutants working for Russia. The Pale Girl was the missing piece to this puzzle and was also revealed to be a powerful mutant who, while appearing ghostly, could also take control of the minds of her victims, bending them to her will. Number 4. Death. Death is one of the children of Apocalypse and his wife Genesis. He is one of the original 4 Horsemen members, which also adds an extra dimension to the fact that Apocalypse generally is referred to any of his 4 Horsemen groups formed thereafter as his children. Although I guess he also kind of thinks of all mutants as his children. so there is that too. But Death is his actual and biological one of, anyways. Death ended up being the chosen champion for the Arakko tournament. He fought against Storm and was defeated. Their battle and just the focus on Storm and all of her struggles up till this point during it was amazing. And I wouldn't be surprised, as Death and Storm both also had a few flirty moments together, if we didn't see the two of them end up face to face again. I should also mention that Storm won her fight against Death while also being temporarily depowered. Yeah, because Storm is a badass. You can check out that fight in 2019's X-Force issue number 14. Recently, Death showed up in the current Wolverine series where he was approached by Logan and his vampire hunter friend, Louise, and asked to help them in their fight against Dracula and the Vampire Nation, to which he agreed. And if you're wondering, wait a minute, didn't he die at the end of the Ten of Swords tournament? He was like kind of torn apart? He didn't. He turns up in Sevalith later and he's alive. Don't worry about it, it's comics. I don't know if he's a vampire or he's just Death so he can't die. I don't know. Number 3. Psylocke's daughter. Psylocke's daughter doesn't have a name just yet, but is a character that was hugely focused on in the Fallen Angel series. If you are a Psylocke fan and you wanted a Quantum-focused series, I highly recommend you check out that series. Psylocke teams up in the series with X-23 and young Cable in an attempt to find out and rescue her daughter. In the end, Mr. Sinister is the one who ends up in possession of the child, who now leads a cybernetic existence within Apoth's remains, and uses her safety as a leverage in order to motivate Quantum to work for him as the leader of his Hellions team. While her daughter might not have a name yet, at least I don't think we've seen her with one, she was featured in an illusion created by Mastermind that Psylocke was trapped in issue 10 of Hellions. Another book that is a current recommended read for my Psylocke fans out there. And hopefully her daughter will get to come back and we'll get to see more of her. I think that could be cool. Number 2. Iska the Unbeaten. Iska is the sister-in-law to Apocalypse, being the sister of his wife Genesis. Her mutant ability is probably one of the coolest out there, along with Domino's luck ability. Iska's power is that she can never lose. She was one of the chosen champions of Arakko who competed in the Otherworld tournament in Ten of Swords, and of course won against her competitor, surprise surprise, the current Captain Britain, Betsy Braddock. Her powers, however, seemingly forced her to change sides in the war between the mutant nation of Arakko and Annihilation's Amenthi demons. She abandoned the mutants of Arakko, joining up with the Amenthi due to the fact that the mutants had become the losing side, and her power prevented her from ever losing. So a little bit into her history there. I like Iska a lot. Number 1. Horticulture. Horticulture is probably one of my favorite new villain teams and groups of characters we've seen thus far in the current line. And they also were someone that could probably threaten the entire Earth, so they might become like huge supervillains in the future. They are a team of elderly women who are scientists, specifically working in the field of botany with plants. I don't know why I said with plants, that's kind of redundant, but you know what I mean. Botany, plants, those are things. Their goal is to eliminate a large chunk of the human population in an effort to return the Earth to a more natural and pristine state. Their leader is Augusta, and members include Lily, Edith, and Opal. It is possible there could be more members of Horticulture as well. These are just the 4 women that we are familiar with based on the 2019 X-Men series and Empire Limited series, where they appeared as enemies and for a short time during Empire, reluctant allies. We've also learned through the Avengers side of things that Harrower, Augusta's great niece, was a former member of the team who split off to do her own thing. Horticulture first made their appearance in volume number 5 of the X-Men in issue number 3. That's the 2019 X-Men series, not the 2021 one, which is the current one. Number 10. The Viscora. The Viscora are more than just one character. They are a bunch of them. They made their first appearance in 2020's Cable issue 5, where they appeared as an antagonistic alien race, although we haven't seen them since, really. I'm still of the mind that the Viscora will return, and perhaps that they never really left, but managed to infect either Scott Summers or Jean Grey, or possibly both, and are laying dormant waiting for a moment to strike. Of course, it's been a while now since we've seen them, so this probably isn't what happened. But either way, I would not be surprised if we saw them again. The Viscora were the reason that S.W.O.R.D. initially went offline and disappeared. Their goal is to travel the cosmos looking for new worlds to absorb into their collective consciousness, learning everything they can about them before completely cleansing said world or possibly universe, wiping out everything within its existence. Should admit, I don't know if they came from another world or another dimension. The portal that they come through kind of implies that they perhaps came from another dimension, but yeah, we haven't seen a lot of them. Number 9. Famine. Famine is another of Apocalypse's and originally 4 horsemen. Unlike Death, who I mentioned on our part 2 of this series, Famine was not as deeply involved in the Otherworld tournament, so we haven't got to know them quite as well as some of his more predominantly featured siblings. Famine, instead of being directly involved as a champion of Araco in the Otherworld tournament featured in the Ten of Swords event, stayed behind instead to act as a representative and witness on behalf of Amenth and Araco, watching the tournament unfold as a guest of Saturnine, there to witness the tournament and kind of argue about things going on. There was some of that happening. Number 8. Pestilence. Pestilence is the daughter of Apocalypse and another member of the original 4 horsemen. Pestilence probably has my favorite character design of all of Apocalypse's, wearing a sun disk headdress atop her head that covers half of her face. Initially, I thought her head was just actually half sun disk, which greatly informed the way I imagined her character's voice in my mind, to be honest. But I'm still gonna keep it like that in my mind. I wish I could put you in there so you could hear her voice, but I can't. And I definitely can't do a very good impression of it right now on the fly. But I'll work on that for the future. Pestilence is another of Apocalypse's that we kinda know less about, not actively participating in the Otherworld tournament in the Ten of Swords either, and also acting as a representative of Araco and Amenth. However, both Pestilence and Famine did get involved near the end of the Ten of Swords event when an all-out war broke out between the mutants of Krakoa and the demons and mutants of Amenth and Araco. Number 7. Ultimaton. Ultimaton actually isn't a new character in the sense of his first appearance, but we did get some new revelations that changes the way that we see his character and definitely makes him feel newly revitalized in terms of lore. Ultimaton's true identity has been unknown for years. Also, I hope I'm saying that right. We're talking over a decade in terms of comic book history of us not knowing who this really is. But in the recent giant-sized Phantom X, which came out in August last year, 2020 if you're watching this into the far future, we learned who Ultimaton really was, as the old villain created by Grant Morrison and Chris Bachalo back in 2003 finally became unmasked. Turns out that Ultimaton is closely related to Phantom X himself, being his identical brother who was also created in the world. One of the many attempts to create a perfect specimen by AIM. But unlike Phantom X, he wanted to stay in the world. He's like, I want to stay here, I'm good. Number 6. Sarah St. John. Although another seeming non-mutant, Sarah St. John could definitely be a huge person of interest moving forward in the new X-Corp comic. Also, this comic was probably my most anticipated new X book in terms of all of the ones we've had announced up till this point. I was just so excited for a business-focused series, plus the return of the X Corporation, plus Angel and Monet both getting to have their time in the spotlight as the main characters of this book. And I gotta say, so far it has not disappointed me, even with all my extra hype about it. X-Corp issue 2 is the Hellfire Gala issue, where the newly relaunched X-Corp team are holding meetings with those interested in investing or otherwise helping the corporation along, making partnerships with them or working for them, you know what I mean? One meeting they don't really manage to get to until it's too late is with Sarah St. John, a representative of Noblesse Pharmaceuticals. Sarah proves to be charming when they do meet up and is the only human who reached out to X-Corp to arrange a meeting during the evening of the gala, should be noted. However, it's revealed that she already made a possibly lucrative sized deal with the newly formed and antagonistic to X-Corp group, Fenris Consulting, owned by the mutant Von Strucker twins Andrea and Andreas. Number 5. Children of the Vault 4.0. That's right, we're talking 4th generation Children of the Vault. It's getting real, baby! While the Children of the Vault may not be a new group, each time they return to the Vault, they're generally upgraded and basically a new version of the team is produced. A new generation, if you will. Initially, with all the information the Vault had acquired, it was only able to evolve them to a 3rd generation, which already was really impressive and powerful. However, after acquiring Darwin's genetic material for study, they were able to evolve even past that final stage, giving us the unstoppable 4th generation of the Children of the Vault. We saw this evolution of the team in 2019's X-Men issue 19, and boy are they scary. I cannot wait to see the X-Men face them again in the future. I'm sure that's gonna happen. I love when I see things in just the X books in general and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a huge problem later down the line. Krakoa has so many enemies, it's crazy. Number 4. Solemn. Solemn is the one that I initially expected Wolverine to fight in the Ten of Swords event. I mean, I think we all did. But He didn't really. Solemn is one of the sword bearers of Arakko who was actually imprisoned when he was recruited. He was imprisoned because he had killed Bracken, War's husband, so War was initially reluctant in recruiting him, even more so when Solemn acted as though he was actually greatly needed and should not only be freed for serving as a champion of Arakko in the Otherworld tournament, but also deserved to receive rewards and gifts for his service. Solemn's powers as a mutant of Arakko grant him super strength and durability. His mutation is that he has adamantium skin. You can see then how he'd make a great match for Logan and why we were all expecting it to happen. Solemn first appeared in 2020's Wolverine in issue 6. He ended up teaming up with Wolverine and went to Hell when they both went to retrieve their blades needed to compete. Because they were in Hell, because Muramasa blades. As expected, he makes his return in Wolverine, where he ends up stealing Logan's Muramasa blade, which Wolverine used in, of course, the tournament. So now Solemn has 2 Muramasa blades. And everybody else has 0 Muramasa blades. Number 3. Ned. So you might all be thinking that I am crazy for putting Ned so high up on this list, but he's just so great. Honestly, you need to know about him just because of how hilarious and how great Ned is. Ned is a lackey of Ames who ends up being recruited by Phantom X to return to the world in an effort to save Storm. Because, well, Ned has super important AIM knowledge, or something like that. Ned ends up joining them in an attempt to save Storm from a version of the techno-organic virus, as Storm would rather save herself than give up to be killed off and resurrected by the Five. Which also, Storm is such a badass. Ned was also important enough to get an invite to the Hellfire Gala, where even after, I assume, receiving his payout from Phantom X to betray AIM, he was still wearing his AIM suit for some reason. Also, I love his appearance at the Hellfire Gala. If you haven't checked out all those issues, you should go and just look who's in the background, because there's a lot of little treats for all y'all that might have been reading all the X books. Ned makes his first appearance in Giant Size Phantom X, and then of course returns when we see them go actually back to the world in Giant Size Storm. Number 2. War. War is another child of Apocalypse, and the final member that I'll have touched on of the original 4 Horsemen. The final one, if you will. Unlike Famine and Pestilence, War did participate in the Otherworld tournament alongside her brother Death. War lost her match despite her unbridled rage because of the wonderful weirdness that was the Ten of Swords event, being a tournament that was led by the mischievous and unpredictable White Witch Saturnine. War ended up actually having to face off against one of her fellow sword bearers, Solemn. However, Solemn, knowing that War obviously really hates him because Solemn killed War's husband, took this opportunity to call in a favor owed to him by Wolverine, and so Wolverine actually had to step in for Solemn in the match. Solemn then revealed that Wolverine was actually the one to have defeated her son in a battle to the death during that match, which of course made War furious with grief and rage. Her anger, while initially making her appear stronger, actually ended up making her vulnerable to an attack from Wolverine, and he managed to cut off her hand and win the match for Solemn, gaining a point for Arakko, unfortunately, with his victory, even though he won. Bittersweet. Number 1. Summoner. Summoner was actually the character featured on our Part 2 thumbnail, so for those who wondered who that was, here's your full answer. Summoner is the grandson of Apocalypse and the son of War and Bracken. However, Summoner is one of the characters who did not survive the Otherworld tournament. Summoner was one of Arakko's sword bearers and champions. He faced off with Wolverine in Ten of Swords in the Otherworld tournament and lost against Logan, being killed with the Muramasa blade. Though it should be noted their fight against one another was pretty epic. Definitely a great read. You can check out that battle in 2020's Wolverine in issue 7. Summoner was a summoner, hence his name. He was able to summon and control the dark beasts of Arakko, elementals, and demons. It should also be noted that Summoner also betrayed Krakoa, pretending to be a friend and then being like, yeah, I'm just here to actually backstab my grandpa Apocalypse and backstab all you mutants because we want to take over Krakoa. Hey. He didn't thumbs up anybody after though, just to be clear. Number 10. Warbird. While not a specific member of the core team, Warbird was a member of the Jean Grey School. In fact, she was considered a member of the faculty of sorts. She arrived with Kid Gladiator when he came to attend the school. She also fought on a few separate occasions to protect the school and its students, namely of them Kid Gladiator. Warbird herself is not a mutant but a member of the Shi'ar alien race and was born to be a fierce warrior, which indeed me? She is. Warbird is as much her codename as it is her rank in the Shi'ar's forces. Warbirds are considered elite warriors in the Shi'ar Empire who are basically bred and trained from birth to be the best of the best. Number 9. Dagger. Dagger was recruited alongside Cloak to join the Dark X-Men, Hammer and Norman Osborn's supplemental mutant team. Although Cloak and Dagger are technically not mutants, but they were considered, I guess, mutant enough. The history of the retcons involving their origin are long and quite inconsistent, and I've talked about it at length before in other videos. At one point they were considered mutants and on and off have been considered as such in the comics, but ultimately it seems they're considered to be simply believed to have been mutants while their powers actually came from exposure to experimental. Number 8. Cloak. Cloak also joined the Dark X-Men with Dagger, but previous to that, the duo had adventures as well with the Power Pack and the New Mutants back in the day. Being not specifically X-Men team members, but at least, X-Men adjacent? And as I said, their origin has been debated throughout their comic book history. So while we don't mainly consider them mutants, they were mutant enough for Osborn to call on for his X-Men team. Beast has even said before that even the results of the test that they have done so far on the duo have been considered not enough to be conclusive in his mind. At least not as far as, Hank is concerned. Although it should be noted that the tests have pointed to them thus far not being mutant, at least with where we're at now in terms of their current origins. But of course, like I said, it's gone back and forth for a long time, so could always change again. Who knows? Number 7. Omega Sentinel. Omega Sentinel ranks a little lower because technically she was referred to as a mutant at one point, but she is also very much a Sentinel, and a person turned into a Sentinel no less. And I guess because of that she's considered unique enough in regards to her journey and makeup to be considered, I guess, a mutant Sentinel. I don't really understand how that works, but yeah, that was a label that was mentioned in the 2004 Excalibur series in issue number 6, so I mean, it's out there. We gotta acknowledge it. I still am like, though, I feel like if you're a mutant and you're a Sentinel, it feels a little contradictory to me. Karima Sharpander was actually once just a normal human woman, a police officer who actually almost fell in love with a mutant. She ended up being kidnapped and turned into a cyborg Sentinel sleeper agent by Bastion. She activated but would later be deprogrammed and then somehow end up disassembled after that, only to be reassembled by Beast and then asked to join the X-Men, which she did in 2006 in issue 192 of the 1991 X-Men series. Since then though, Omega Sentinel has gone back to being extremely Sentinel in nature, with her acting as a major antagonist in the 2021 Inferno series and pretty much everything leading up to that in very modern comics last few years. Number 6. Cerebro. Yeah, and Cerebro wasn't just a member either. They actually had their own team of X-Men that they were the leader of. Cerebro ended up gaining sentience and set out to catalog all mutants on Earth. That seems nice, but not in this way. They wanted to catalog those mutants by kidnapping them and then keeping them in basically like cryogenic pods. I guess as one does. I mean, I guess what else did we expect Cerebro to do when they became sentient, right? Finding and recording mutants was pretty much all they knew prior to that. Cerebro ended up creating their own X-Men team and leading it, although ultimately the real X-Men did have to come in and put a stop to their crazy schemes. And of course we also found out that Cerebro's X-Men were actually nanotech beings that they had created. But either way you look at this one, whether or not you consider Cerebro's team to be official enough, Cerebro themselves in a way was a member of the X-Men originally, they just didn't have sentience back in the day. But Cerebro has been around since almost day one when it comes to the main team and original roster. Might not be exactly day one, but it's pretty close to day one, I want to say. I can't remember if Cerebro's in issue number 1, but close. Number 5. Cerebra. I know, so many Cerebs on this list, but what do you expect? These are vital members of these teams either way you slice it. Cerebro was a much more loyal member of the X-Men team in the end in comparison to Cerebro. She was created from the remains of Cerebro and was an AI built by X-Men Forge. Cerebra ended up teaming up with the X-Men on various adventures and even fought alongside them to protect the young mutants of their current school, X-Haven, when it was attacked by demons. See, X-Haven existed within Limbo, but Magic had put up defenses to shield it. However, then those ended up failing and hence the demons attacked. Hence Cerebra defending the school. Cerebra made her first appearance in Extraordinary X-Men issue number 1. Number 4. Energizer. Katie Power is a member of the Power Pack who goes by the superhero name Energizer. The Power Pack are a team of kid superheroes who also all happen to be siblings, the children of James and Margaret Power, who got their powers from a dying alien seeking to protect the Earth, and the children specifically in an altercation, which is also sadly how they died. Katie ended up getting made an honorary X-Men in the pages of the 90s issue of the Uncanny X-Men, volume number 1, issue 195. Here, Katie teams up with the X-Men to save her siblings from the Morlocks, who have taken basically all the kids and manipulated their memories and appearance so they believe they're actually like children of Morlock and Elite. Katie is given a jacket by Kitty Pryde in the issue and made an honorary X-Men as she joins the team to go down into the sewers and rescue her siblings. Also, don't worry, the siblings get rescued. I love the Power Pack. The Power Pack is like just an adorable, just wholesome, fun time. Number 3. Hepzibah. You might be familiar with Hepzibah if you are familiar or perhaps very familiar with the X-Men. Actually, Hepzibah isn't even really Hepzibah's real name, but we can't pronounce Hepzibah's real name, so just call her Hepzibah. She actually has a long history with the team of the X-Men, but also with an important family member of that team, namely Summer's patriarch, the father of Scott, Alex, and Gabriel, space pirate Corsair, or the father of Cyclops, Havoc, and Vulcan, if you rather. In fact, Hepzibah met Corsair in prison and helped to orchestrate the escape of those that would found the team known as the Starjammers. Hepzibah would go on to become very close to Corsair, and the two would even become lovers. She would team up with the X-Men multiple times during her comic book adventures, and even later join that team after Corsair's apparent death. Hepzibah is not a mutant though. She's an alien belonging to the race known as the Mephistozoids, who actually were prominent in the parts of space now known as part of the Shi'ar Empire, as they went to war with the Shi'ar and ultimately lost. And also later were like basically labeled as savages by the Shi'ar, and they like created propaganda to be like, they're all animals and they're all evil, which is pretty messed up. War is a messed up thing. Number 2. Lockheed. That's right, Lockheed might be out of this world, but not in the mutant sense. Lockheed is actually an alien who ended up enjoying the company of the X-Men, and specifically mutant and member Kitty Pryde, so much that he decided to leave his home and his people behind and go join the X-Men team. He often goes where Kitty does and is her loyal ally and companion, although he wasn't with her when she was in a bullet flying through space, but we'll talk about that more later. He has also been a double agent, staying with the X-Men while spying on them for SWORD as a secret undercover agent, tasked with keeping an eye on the mutants and feeding information to SWORD. He actually did this in exchange for SWORD's help in regards to problems on his homeworld, so if you're thinking, wow, that's pretty shady, Lockheed, look, he had his reasons, okay? And you know what? Lockheed still really loves the X-Men. I don't think he was trying to do it to be malicious even. Lockheed was actually a fearsome warrior and hero among his own people, and he actually left his fiance to stay with Kitty and the X-Men, so he also gave up a lot just to hang out with them. I love Lockheed. I almost made him number 1. Number 1. Juggernaut. Juggernaut might be known as a villain to the X-Men, but he's also joined the team too. In fact, his story is actually pretty sad. He spent most of his life on the outside looking in a lot of respects. When it came to his family, where his father seemed to even prefer his stepson to Kane, and in regards to the mutant community, which Juggernaut's always kind of like been a part of, but not really, because he's not really a mutant, so he's kind of kept out. Which is maybe why he became a villain? I don't know. Charles was always a part of the mutant world, but even when Kane Marco became Juggernaut, kind of reaching out for his own power, he was shunned in a way by his brother for doing so. Charles Xavier may be seen as the original creator of the superhero team of the X-Men, but in some ways, he was very much a gatekeeper, at least for Juggernaut, even though I know it feels weird to say that about Charles, since he's kind of a guy that's supposed to be like, all mutants come in, but look, he's got issues. Sure, Juggernaut was the one with the vendetta against Charles originally, seeing Charles as abandoning him, but it always felt like rather than resolve that conflict, the two both just decided to battle against one another for like a really long time. Fortunately, as time has worn on, things have changed between them. Juggernaut has changed. He's served both as a villain as well as an ally and even team member when it comes to the X-Men, and recently in the comics he's taken charge of his own power, going from being an avatar in essence of Sidorak to being an anti-hero who serves only the causes he himself believes in, no longer tied to the will of Sidorak. And he's got that cool new armor too. Still made from Sidorak materials, but he's not like tied to him anymore because it wasn't given to him. Ha! Take that, Sidorak! Number 10. Deathlock Prime. Deathlock Prime hails from the reality of Earth 10511, where in this future the Roxxon Corporation takes over the world. While not a mutant, he is a member of the X-Force who is also seen as a member of the staff for a short time in the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Deathlock Prime is actually a human cyborg in regards to his origin, but this doesn't stop him from lending his expertise and advice to the students of the Jean Grey School. While there, Deathlock Prime gives a guest lecture and even tells some of the kids what their futures might end up being, probably based on his own future. He also warns Wolverine about Evan Sabinur, aka Kid Apocalypse, who later takes the code name of Genesis himself. Deathlock Prime says that Evan could either be a hero or a deadly enemy of the mutants. Number 9. Quicksilver. Okay, so a lot of people in the comments for the part 1 of this list really wanted me to include folks like Franklin Richards, aka Powerhouse, Scarlet Witch, and her brother Quicksilver on that list, or on a potential part 2. Here is the problem with that. While Franklin, Wanda, and Pietro were all once considered mutants and yet are no longer, none of them were technically members of the X-Men team, which is why I couldn't really put any of them on that list. Wanda is first and foremost an Avenger and former X-Men villain, but not really an X-Men member. Franklin is always with the Fantastic Four or Future Foundation, and while he spent some time on Krakoa prior to losing his powers and mutant status, still, once again, not an X-Men. Quicksilver is the closest that we've got, which is why I've included him at the impassioned behest of a good number of you. So Quicksilver is here for you. He's speeding on into the list. Quicksilver was never on the X-Men team, but was a member of one of the X-Factor teams. And while many people forget this fact as it's no longer considered, I guess, the most iconic iteration of the team, the X-Factor team, the original one anyways, was created to actually be a team for the original X-Men to be on when they made their return to the spotlight years later, but the name was already basically taken at that point by a newer team featuring sort of the next era of mutant heroes such as Wolverine, Rogue, and Storm. The version of the X-Factor team that Quicksilver was a part of was also a return to that original team's government-funded roots, which the first X-Factor team was government-funded. Number 8. Elisande Stewart. Elisande Stewart was one of the founding members of the British Who, or at least one of the most important members of that organization, which also stands for the Weird Happenings Organization, I believe. As a result of her work, Elisande would often run into and team up with the Excalibur team. Later on, she ended up also being considered a member of the unofficial Muir Island X-Men team, as she aimed to help defend Muir Island from the Reavers. Elisande Stewart herself is just a normal human lady, not a mutant. She serves in the British Army, where she holds the rank of Brigadier. Or at least, she did hold that rank. She's technically dead now. She was framed by a rival organization and then later killed without much thought by Jamie Braddock while he was using his reality warping powers, as Jamie is wont to do. Number 7. Kid Gladiator. Kid Gladiator, despite not being a mutant, actually attended the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning himself. On part 1 of this list, I talked about his sort of bodyguard turned school staff member Warbird, but I didn't make Q-Bark his own point. So here we go. Kid Gladiator is the son of Gladiator, aka Calark, and as such can be extremely powerful due to his physiology and his heritage. However, as a kid, this kind of became a problem. At one point he destroyed half of the Shi'ar royal city Chandalar just because, well, he could. As such, his punishment was to go to Earth and learn how to better control and use his powers at the Jean Grey School, which I feel like he took as a punishment, but maybe Calark was also like, look, you just need to figure it out, okay? Can't just go destroying cities and such. Number 6. Deadpool. Deadpool definitely wasn't a member of the X-Men because they wanted him there. While Deadpool has a long history with the X-Force team, when it comes to the mainstay team of the X-Men, the mutant staple team at Marvel Comics, Deadpool was actually only permitted to be a kind of like an honorary member. I mean, he was given full membership, so technically he's a member. So that the X-Men could keep a closer eye on Wade, basically. Deadpool desperately was searching for his purpose in life and got it in his head that joining the X-Men was the best way for him to be a hero. He ended up leaving the X-Men team after helping them out with a problem that they believed he'd actually caused, but in reality he was kind of just like framed for. Well, I guess in the end, the X-Men kind of like kicked him off the team, but he also was gonna leave anyway. So there. Number 5. Dr. Kavita Rao. Dr. Dr. Kavita Rao is an important ally and friend to mutant kind, who was once a very misguided and powerful enemy. She attempted to cure the legacy virus when it was running rampant, but failed to do so before Beast Hank McCoy did. Later, she was then approached to create a cure for the mutant gene, with the understanding that it would not be used by force, but would simply be given to those that wanted it, people whose powers were basically super dangerous and had potentially even ruined their lives in some cases. Dr. Rao decided to accept the task. She successfully created a serum which turned mutants into humans. The cure was named Hope. After it was revealed that whole plot was about exterminating mutant kind, Dr. Rao submitted to the will of the X-Men. They destroyed her research, with only Hank keeping the last sample of the Hope serum. In the end, her villainous actions later inspired Dr. Rao to set down a path of redemption after the events of M-Day. She joined a team of scientists brought together by Beast to help bring back mutant kind. Dr. Rao would remain working with and alongside the X-Men throughout their Utopia days, and was later a staff member for the Jean Grey School of Higher Learning. Number 4. Dupe. Despite Dupe being a glorious weirdo, he's never really been confirmed as a mutant. We don't really know what exactly Dupe is. He is either a mutant or some kind of possibly alien or being from another dimension, but the bottom line is it's never been explicitly verified and set in stone what his origin is. And honestly, this is Dupe we're talking about, so I don't think it ever will be. As a result of all that, he's a candidate for this list, despite being maybe one of the weirdest teammates, mutant or no. Dupe has had many adventures with the X-Men and was even the receptionist at the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning, joining up with and aiding Wolverine there. He's also been seen on Krakoa since then. It's clear that Dupe feels most at home among mutants, and that is a place where he gets to be, even if he isn't a mutant. Number 3. Amanda Sefton. Amanda Sefton is the adopted sister of mutant and X-Men member Nightcrawler. She is also one of Kurt's major love interests. Yeah, it's complicated. Amanda was actually an alias that she adopted when she went to investigate what her adopted brother Kurt was up to after the death of their brother Steven was kinda pinned on Kurt. Undercover, Jermaine Zardos, which is her real name, became Amanda Sefton, and it was during this time that Kurt would actually fall in love with her, not recognizing, I don't think, that Amanda was his sister Jermaine at the time. At least, I'm pretty sure he didn't recognize that. I'm not sure if she really even changed her appearance, so it's a whole weird thing. Jermaine, or Amanda as we more commonly know her now, is a powerful sorceress, but is not a mutant, and has been an ally to the X-Men, also belonging to their unofficial Muir Island team. Number 2. Spider-Man. Spider-Man has been a longtime friend to the mutants. Although they initially got off on the wrong foot when they first ran into each other in the comics, they eventually realized that they were both on the side of good and ended up becoming friends and allies. Spider-Man in the 90s animated series even goes to the X-Men for help, hoping they can actually cure him, but only to learn that Professor X isn't so much about curing anyone as he is about helping mutants find their place and their way. There is also the matter of the fact that Spider-Man isn't really even that kind of mutant. He's considered a mutate, having his genetic makeup altered by that radioactive spider bite, and possibly also by his fate to become Spider-Man as a preordained spider totem in the Web of Life and Destiny, which is also a thing. Spider-Man at one point isn't just a member of the team, he actually has his own team of mutants that he himself is responsible for teaching. How cool is that? Special class. Number 1. Longshot. While some might think of Longshot as a mutant, he doesn't consider himself as such. He is believed to be the clone and possibly both the father and son of Shatterstar. Things get weird in the Mojoverse, and Longshot is basically kind of a paradoxical time loop in and of himself in terms of him and his heritage, as is Shatterstar in some ways, and kind of as is Spiral as well too. Shatterstar himself is a genetically engineered mutant, and Longshot is a clone of him, but despite that tie to sort of mutantdom or mutant kind, albeit a genetically engineered version of mutant kind, he doesn't consider himself to be a mutant. Longshot was instantly liked by the X-Men when they first found him, and ended up joining the team in fighting back against Mojo. Initially, he didn't actually remember who he was or much about himself, and spent a good amount of time on those first adventures with the X-Men team trying to recover his own lost memories.
Coming in at number 10, we have the bloodthirsty vampire Wolverine. In an alternate universe where vampires have launched an all-out assault on the United States, most of the X-Men are bidden and mind-controlled by the Lord of the Vampires, Dracula. Unfortunately for Dracula, however, Wolverine's healing ability allows him to regain his own mental control despite becoming a vampire, and thus is able to overthrow Dracula and become leader of the vampires. Consumed by a bloodlust that amplifies his already pretty frightening rage, Wolverine and his vampire army are able to wipe out most other superpowered life on the planet, only finally being defeated by the combined forces of Doctor Strange and the Punisher as a vampire hunting combination. Coming in at number 9, we have the evil Iceman hailing from the Age of Apocalypse universe. In a world where Apocalypse has taken over mutant kind and only Magneto and a few X-Men are capable of fighting back, the usually optimistic Bobby Drake was forged into a heartless warrior, giving him much stronger control of his ice powers than other depictions of Iceman, and becoming a living streak of ice that can travel instantaneously through water. This version of Iceman would eventually betray his teammates and ally himself with Dark Beast, and was only eventually able to be defeated by having his head shoved inside of a furnace, which I guess is one way to kill an ice-based villain, but geez, that's a little bit overkill. Coming in at number 8, we have the brainwashed Wolverine of Earth 14850. At one point in the regular Marvel Universe, Wolverine was captured and brainwashed by Hydra in order to assassinate the Avengers, but luckily was able to be deprogrammed before he did any real damage. On this alternate Earth, however, the deprogramming never took place, and Wolverine's killing spree of superpowered heroes was able to last for months. Armed with all of his incredible abilities, absolutely no remorse, and the addition of Hydra-developed teleporting technology that nullified even Wolverine's usual weaknesses, and this was a horrifying enemy that even the Avengers couldn't handle. Coming in at number 7, we have Basilisk, the twisted, mask-wearing variant of Cyclops. On an alternate world where anti-mutant sentiment is somehow even higher than the regular Marvel Universe, Scott Summers' backstory is made even more tragic. Killing 7 people, including his own parents when his powers first manifest, Cyclops is locked away in the prison Alcatraz and forced to wear a mask made of ruby quartz to control his laser vision. The evil governor of the prison even goes so far as to mutilate Cyclops and remove his eyelids, making the twisted basilisk mask the only method Scott has to control his deadly abilities, a favor that Cyclops would repay by killing the governor and launching a prison break that would eventually lead him back to this universe's X-Men. Coming in at number 6, we're taking a bit of a break from the comics with the Wolverine symbiote from the video game Spider-Man: Web of Shadows. In this game's story, Wolverine has traveled to New York City to deal with a growing symbiote infestation, and even briefly fights Spider-Man when he believes the wall crawler is actually Venom. Unfortunately for Wolverine, he finds himself overwhelmed by actual symbiotes on top of a church and attacks Spider-Man again as the Wolverine symbiote. With all of his usual healing abilities on top of all the usual symbiote enhancements, this version of Wolverine might just be the scariest he's ever been. Coming in at number 5, we have the Ultimate Universe version of Jamie Madrox, aka Multiple Man. Multiple Man's powers have always been a bit overwhelming, with the ability to seemingly create an unlimited amount of duplicates of himself as long as they're generated one at a time. In the Ultimate Universe, however, this power was pushed beyond its limits when Jamie allied himself with the Brotherhood of Mutants and created tens of thousands of bomb-wielding versions of himself with no regard for his own life. While the Ultimatum event featured many shocking moments, few are as existentially disturbing as literal thousands of clones strapping explosives to themselves just to wipe out several superhero bases. Coming in at number 4, we have the possessed Professor X from Earth 6141. During the event known as M-Day, when Scarlet Witch wiped out most of mutant kind, the extremely powerful telepath known as the Shadow King was able to escape the loss of his powers by transferring his mind through the multiverse to the alternate world of Earth 6141, where he was able to successfully possess the mind of this world's Charles Xavier before the X-Men were even formed. Combining both of their telepathic might, this version of Xavier turned all of his students into perfect killing machines, and placed them firmly under his psychic control, getting them to kill any superheroes who tried to interfere in the Shadow King's schemes. While eventually defeated by the team known as New Excalibur, this group of Shadow X-Men left their world shaking in terror. Coming in at number 3, we have the vampire variant of Storm, aka Bloodstorm. In an alternate reality where Storm was bitten by Dracula before discovering the X-Men, Storm came to Charles Xavier for help with her condition. Unfortunately, her bloodlust was too strong and she wound up feasting on both the Professor and Beast. Horrified at what she'd done, this version of Storm would eventually try and redeem herself after she found herself as part of an invasion force attacking the main Marvel universe. While she eventually bonded and made amends with the Beast of this dimension, her combination of weather controlling and vampire powers made Bloodstorm one of the more powerful X-Men variants that the regular X-Men have ever had to face. Coming in at number 2, we have one of the most powerful enemies the X-Men have ever seen with Brother Mutant. On Earth 127, a male variant of the Scarlet Witch, known as the Scarlet Warlock, attempted to cast a spell that would transfer Wolverine's adamantium skeleton to Magneto, thus giving Magneto an incredible power boost given his magnetic abilities. However, something with the spell went wrong, and the Scarlet Warlock, Wolverine, Magneto, Quicksilver, and the villain Mesmero were all merged into a singular being known as Brother Mutant. With all 5 of these mutants' powers combined into one villainous figure, Brother Mutant was such a powerful threat that a multiversal team of Wolverines had to be assembled specifically to stop him, just to ensure that all of that power wasn't unleashed on the rest of the Marvel multiverse. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the one and only Magneto from the Ultimate Universe. Unlike a lot of the other entries on this list, this Magneto variant doesn't have any additional powers or physical mutations to make him even more intimidating, but rather is terrifying just because of his sheer willpower. This version of Magneto is much more cynical and dark than the complex figure of the regular Marvel Universe, and when he believed his had been killed by Doctor Doom, Ultimate Magneto was furious enough to begin a global switching the polarity of Earth's poles with his magnetic powers and beginning the incredibly controversial event known as Ultimatum. This version of Magneto caused the deaths of millions of people and dozens of beloved superheroes, and was only finally able to be stopped when Cyclops put him out of his misery with a laser blast to the head.
Number 10, Crusader. Crusader is the daughter of X-Men team member Rogue and Avenger Captain America. I know, a weird combination. But in the reality of Earth 9811, these two ended up together after the heroes and villains on Battleworld decided to call a truce. Remaining there, they settled down and raised families, putting their differences aside. I'm not sure how their relationship worked, with Rogue not really being able to touch people and all at this point, or how she had a child considering that, but perhaps, like on Earth 616, she eventually was able to work through the trauma causing this side effect of her powers. Or perhaps the Captain America of Earth 9811 was immune to her involuntary energy and power draining effects. Either way, Sarah is their daughter. She gets much of her power from her mother, or rather she gets much of her power from the power her mother had absorbed in her day, meaning that Sarah is super strong, durable, and can fly. She is also considered worthy enough to lift Thor's hammer and wields her father's shield. Number 9, Wolverine. I really wanted to put Laura Kinney higher up on this list because, well, I love her so much, but unfortunately the psionics are just always pushing some of my favorite and most powerful characters further down on these lists. Those psionics. Oh well. Laura Kinney as X-23 and now Wolverine is still one of the most powerful children of the X-Men around. Some argue that she is more clone, while others argue that she is more biological offspring of Logan, but in reality, she's kind of a bit of both. She was created as a female clone of Wolverine after his genetic material was combined with that of her creator, scientist Sarah Kinney. Sarah noticed that there were damage spots basically in the samples of Logan's genetic material that they had, which was why their cloning process had been unsuccessful up to this point. And so she used her own genetic material to patch those rough spots, which made Laura a female clone. Sarah was forced to carry Laura to term as a surrogate by her jealous colleague Xander Rice, as punishment for even creating the female clone to begin with, a strategy that admittedly had not been approved. Laura has powers similar to her father. She has a regenerative healing factor and was also trained from birth to be a skilled fighter, bodyguard, and assassin. Number 8. Chimera. Chimera is the daughter of Storm and likely Black Panther, who hails from the alternate reality of 13729. Yeah, sadly Storm and T'Challa have never had a child together in the main continuity. I know, it's a bit of a bummer. Unless they had like a real secret child that we just don't know about yet, but I doubt it. Chimera seems to have inherited the powers of her mother, but also shares a connection to the Earth, which allows her to draw on and harness its energy. She is also a skilled tracker and can communicate telepathically with animals. I'd also assume, as she's the daughter of Storm, that she's a skilled combatant as well. As while Storm is more well known for her goddess status and weather manipulation powers, she is also an extremely skilled fighter. And if she's Black Panther's daughter, then she should definitely be a skilled fighter. I mean, you got two amazing parents that are both amazing fighters, so just saying. Number 7. Charles Xavier II. Charles Xavier II is the son of Charles Xavier and Mystique, if you can believe that. I know, it's pretty shocking. Charles Xavier II was technically born into the reality of Earth 616, where we later find out that while Mystique actually took the form of Moira when giving birth, Charles actually knew that he was in a relationship with Raven, so it wasn't like a trick of hers. They were actually just wanted to be together, I guess. This version of Charles, however, is an all grown up one from the alternate future of Earth 13729. When his powers first manifested, he accidentally killed his adoptive mother and ended up later joining forces with his half-brother Raze, another child of Mystique's sired by Wolverine, another child of the X-Men. Charles Xavier II has a brilliant and conniving mind and, like his father, is an immensely gifted telepath, capable of using his powers to bend others to his will. Number 6. Polaris. Polaris is the daughter of Magneto, and while you might not think of Magneto as being an X-Men, considering, you know, he started out as an X-Men villain, he has also worked with the team before and even served as a member himself. Heck, at one point he was in charge of the whole New Mutants crew, let's not forget that. Magneto may have some questionable methods when it comes to getting justice that put him on the spectrum of villain, but I think at the end of the day, he's just trying to do what's best for mutants. Or at least what he thinks is best for mutant kind. Polaris, like her father, also has magnetic-based powers, which, like her father, are also pretty impressive. Polaris is considered an alpha-level mutant and recently got to join the X-Men team herself after being elected to join them in the Krakoan X-Men elections. Psychic elections. Imagine if we could all just vote psychically. That would be awesome. That would be so much easier. You would just like sit down and you'd be like, who do I want to vote for? Done. Number 5. Cable. Cable is the son of Scott Summers, aka Cyclops, non-X member Madeline Pryor, who later becomes the villain known as the Goblin Queen, and another X-Man's, Jean Grey, who kind of becomes like an adoptive mother but who also possesses Madeline's memories of raising baby Christopher. Because comics. Cable is Nathan Christopher Charles Summers, often referred to as just Nathan Summers or really just Cable, although back in the day we did know him as Baby Christopher. Cable as a baby was kidnapped by Apocalypse and infected with the techno-organic virus. This is the only thing that makes him weak-ish, but really he is still amazingly strong as he can even fend off that virus, containing it to one side of his body using his psionic powers. That in and of itself is pretty impressive, as the techno-organic virus is generally known for being, well, unstoppable. Even with his psionic powers mainly preoccupied, Cable is still a hard one to beat, as he has so many combatant-based skills that he brings to the table, and he is also an experienced time traveler besides. Number 4. Rachel Summers. Yes, get ready, because many of the most powerful X-Kids out there just happen to be Summers related, so yeah, get ready for that. Honestly, I've always wanted to do a video just to explain the complicated nature that is the Summers and Grey family tree, which honestly is a lot, and it's very timey-wimey. humanity. Rachel herself is one of those very complex kids of theirs. She is the daughter of Jean Grey and Scott Summers from the alternate Earth of 811. In that reality, she was made into a hound, a weapon used to hunt down mutants, even being one herself. Rachel is an extremely powerful telepath and telekinetic who also has the ability to chronoskim and manipulate time, even traveling through it. Rachel is also known for being an avatar of the Phoenix, at one time actually considered the true avatar for it, but then later having the power sort of dialed down to a mere echo of it. So she was no longer the true avatar, they were just like, you just have a thing, and it's not even like the real Phoenix Force, but it's like a version of it. Still, the seeming piece or echo of the Phoenix Force that resides within her has been known to flare up from time to time, or her connection to the Phoenix Force, however we want to see that, occasionally boosting Rachel to an off-the-charts level of power. But like I said, that doesn't happen all the time. Number 3. Hope Summers. Hope is the adopted daughter of Cable, who was originally known as the Mutant Messiah Baby. Cable saved Hope from Bishop, who basically wanted to destroy her. In Bishop's reality, the Mutant Messiah would end up causing the event that led to the oppression and persecution of mutants. However, in Cable's reality, the Mutant Messiah would grow up to become a savior, so you can see why these two were opposed on this topic. For the X-Men of Earth 616, the Mutant Messiah was the first new mutant to have been born since basically M-Day, and so she brought hope to the mutants of the 616 reality. Cable body-slided with Hope to another time to raise her in safety. He would end up naming Hope after her adoptive mother, his love who died, Hope, and she got the Summers name from Cable himself. But although she looks a lot like Jean, she actually has no biological relation to the Summers or the Grey families, at least not that we know of. Hope's mutant abilities allow her to copy the powers of anyone within a certain range. Hope also gains access to these powers without struggling at all to use them, receiving them basically at their peak level and with the auto knowledge basically of how to use them. So if you're like, oh, she's gotta like figure it out, no, she's just like instant god mode with those powers basically. Number 2. Scarlet Witch. Wanda is known for being one of the most powerful beings in the Marvel Universe. She has used her powers to completely warp reality the world over, and her chaos magic has pulled off other immensely world-changing feats, such as flipping the alignment of all major heroes and villains in the comics during the events of Axis. Initially, her chaos magic powers were believed to be somewhat mutant in origin. In fact, they were kind of presented initially as like Jinx-like mystical mutant abilities during her first appearances. However, we've since learned that both Wanda and her superpowered brother Pietro, aka Quicksilver, were never really mutants at all, nor were they related to Magneto. However, they still spent a good amount of their life around Magneto, who secretly believed them to be his children, and then another good amount of time thinking that he was their actual father, until it was revealed that this was all due to manipulation by the High Evolutionary. High Evolutionary just coming in and messing pretty much everybody up when it comes to their backstories and origins. Wanda herself has never really gotten along with the X-Men, especially since the events of M-Day, but she is still considered, I think, a part of Magneto's family, and a powerful one at that, regardless of her status as a mutant or a non-mutant. I know there are some people out there that want to be like, it never happened, but like, they still spent a lot of time together thinking that they were family, so I think we can still count it, friends. Also, make Wanda a mutant again. Do it. Make it happen. Give me Wanda and Quicksilver back. Number 1. X-Man. X-Man is Nathaniel Grey, the lab-born child made by combining the genetic materials of both Jean Grey and Cyclops. So basically like Cable, but if he had been made perfectly by villain Mr. Sinister. He actually hails from the alternate reality of AOA, Age of Apocalypse, Earth 295. Here, Sinister created him to use as his own weapon, but of course, Nate being so powerful, managed to escape Sinister and instead ended up being raised by Forge of Earth 295. He is considered one of the most powerful mutants of all time, which would also make him one of the most powerful children of the X-Men out there. Nate can warp reality, resurrect the dead, resurrect himself, travel to alternate Earths and dimensions, and even manipulate the time stream. He is basically the most OP of characters when it comes to the Marvel Universe, and if you've seen artwork of him, you will probably recognize him as someone who looks like Mutant Jesus, which yes, he is god level, so that is the point. Number 10. Kristoff and Kadira Von Doom. Kristoff and Kadira Von Doom are the children of Storm and Doctor Doom. They come from the novel series X-Men The Chaos Engine, which is actually a trilogy wherein we explore what would happen if 3 great villains took control of the Marvel Universe, creating their own version of a perfect world using the Cosmic Cube. It starts off with Doom's variation on this world. In this reality, Doctor Doom has made Storm his wife, and she rules by his side as his Empress. The union of these powerful characters produces 2 children, Kristoff and Kadira. We can assume, of course, being the children of both both Doom and Storm that they would be physically, mentally, and demonstrably powerful when it came to their abilities, especially being raised by these two powerhouses. Also, if I wasn't clear about this is an alternate reality, so if you're like, when did this happen? It is not main continuity. Number 9. Nocturne. Nocturne is the daughter of Nightcrawler and Scarlet Witch. Obviously, not from the main continuity. In fact, Talia Wagner is known for being a part of a multiversal hero team, the Exiles. Nocturne is from the alternate reality of Earth 2182. In fact, back on her home reality, which first appeared in Millennial Visions, Talia is also known as a member of the X-Men team, fighting alongside her father, Nightcrawler, who is actually their field leader. She is a low-level telepath with incredible superhuman agility skills, the ability to wall crawl, and the ability to fire powerful brimstone hex energy bolts, something inherited from both her father and her mother. Nocturne's physical appearance is also similar to her father's, a bit demonic looking, and of course, blue. All my blue X-Men. Top 10 blue X-Men. Actually, I feel like there's a lot of X-Men that are blue. Or mutants that are blue, maybe? There's a lot of blue mutants, for sure. I don't know about X-Men team members. Number 8. Jimmy Hudson. Jimmy Hudson is the son of Wolverine from the ultimate reality of Earth 1610. His powers are similar to his father's, but in this reality, they're believed to work a little bit differently. As opposed to just being insane healing powers, Jimmy's power set in this universe as a mutant is believed to be based more in survival. So these powers aren't necessarily just about healing, but survival instincts and capability, meaning that Jimmy is just much better at surviving and evolving to survive than anyone else alive on the planet. And I mean that because in this reality, Wolverine eventually dies, so really Jimmy is the only one left alive who's really good at surviving. Jimmy Hudson has also been bonded to a poison before and gained control of his poison, which are basically alien-like beings resembling symbiotes in look and abilities, but ultimately a different alien race themselves, called poisons. So yeah. Jimmy is the son of Wolverine and Magneto's wife, Magda Lencher, although Wolverine urges him through a letter when the truth of his connection to Jimmy is revealed that he actually shouldn't focus too much on, who his biological parents are. Jimmy was raised by adoptive parents. His dad actually served with Logan in the war and agreed to look after Jimmy in his father's place, even giving the young boy his own family name. Hudson. Number 7. Esme. Esme is one of the main Stepford Cuckoos. Well, I mean, I guess they're all pretty main, but you know what I mean. She's probably one of the most well-known if we're talking offhand about how many of the Cuckoos you can name. Esme and the other Cuckoos are basically like the children of Emma Frost, although as I've said before, not children that she had consensually. And I didn't say that before in this list, but if you've heard me talk about the Stepford Cuckoos and their relation to Emma, yeah. Instead, these were lab babies basically made from Emma's eggs that were stolen from Emma while she was in a comatose state. Esme, like the other Cuckoos, is kind of like a genetic clone as well as a child of Emma's, and Emma actually does consider the Cuckoos to be like her daughters. She treats them as though they were her own flesh and blood, and often her own responsibility, kinda stepping in to like play mom sometimes, although she does give them freedom to make their own mistakes. I guess what I mean is Emma isn't known for being like a controlling kind of parent. She's like, I'm here when you need me, otherwise you do you. More recently in the comics, Esme, known for her diamond form and powerful telepathic abilities, teamed up and primarily dated young Cable. Well, technically all the Cuckoos were dating him at one point, though I would say Esme was basically the main squeeze of young Cable and the sister that he was most taken by while he was dating all of them. And if you're like, whoa, how did that happen? The Stepford Cuckoos, they share things because they're kind of like a hive mind. So they're like, we'll just all date this person. It's cool. Also Krakoa, everyone's dating everyone. Number 6, Akihiro. Akihiro is the son of Wolverine and his wife Itsu. Unfortunately, before Akihiro was even born, his life took a turn for the worse. Along with inheriting his father's powers, I think he also inherited some of his tragic luck. Wolverine has the worst luck, I think. His mother, Itsu, was killed before she could give birth to him, assassinated. The child was believed dead, but in reality, he had been cut from her womb and possibly, due to his inherited healing powers, miraculously survived. Although, that's not clear, because usually your powers don't manifest until puberty, but sometimes your powers manifest when you're in the womb. I mean, look at Professor X with Cassandra Nova. Apparently that's a thing that happened. Akihiro would grow up and become a pawn of the villain known as Romulus. For most of his life, he'd also be known as Daken, a cruel nickname given to him when he was a child, being raised by his adoptive parents. The nickname was given to him because of his mixed race appearance, being part American and part Japanese. Though to be clear, his parents weren't the ones that gave it to him. It was people around his parents. appearance. Akahiro's powers are similar to Wolverine's, though his bone claws are a little bit different in terms of placement and appearance. Like his father, Akahiro is also known for being a skilled fighter as well. The apple does not fall far from the tree when it comes to fighting abilities. Number 5. Xandra Naramani. Xandra is Professor X's daughter, who is created out of his genetic material and that of his lover's genetic material, the Shi'ar Magistrix Lilandra Naramani, after both of them were believed dead. As such, Xandra grew up to become Shi'ar royalty and also spent a good amount of her life hunted because of this, with various parties attempting to use her for their own means. Xandra is an extremely gifted telepath. She can manipulate others' minds, read minds, and can create hyper-realistic telepathic illusions. Number 4. Ruby Summers. She was the ex-offspring used in our oh-so-clickable thumb for the part 1 to this list, and although she was on my extended list for that part 1, my long brainstorm that I came up with, I didn't get around to talking about her because I kind of reached a point where there were too many Summers children on that list, and I was like, I don't want to make this a top 10 children of Cyclops. We got that list, and also that's not what this list is. What can I say? Sykes got strong genes. That's why Mr. Sinister is so obsessed after all and is known as the #1 fan of the Summers Club. Scott Summers is Ruby's dad in the alternate reality she hails from, and Emma Frost is her mother. This makes Ruby fairly powerful, not at the level of Hope or X-Man, but still pretty impressive. She's also super cool looking, which is an added bonus. Ruby hails from the alternate Earth of 1191, the home reality of famous X-Men ally Bishop. Ruby is also capable of emitting optic blasts like her dad and his brothers, but she has more control over when and how she emits these blasts, unlike her dad who's like, I literally need a visor. Ruby also comes with her Ruby form, which like her mother's Diamond form, grants her invulnerability and pretty much immortality. Number 3. Olivier Raven. Olivier Raven is legally known as Olivier Lebeau and is one of the alternate reality children of Gambit and Rogue. Honestly, I feel like there are not enough of these kids out in the multiverse. I don't know if that's just me. For a couple as famous as Gambit and Rogue, I mean, you would think that we'd have a lot more kids from them, at least through the multiverse. Though admittedly, I'm not quite sure that Rogue and Gambit are really the kid-having type, at least from what I've seen in the main continuity. They seem pretty content with just having their fur babies right now. So maybe they just aren't super into having kids as a family. Olivier hails from the reality of Earth 41001, the reality of Gen Next, a group Ollie is part of. He has powers similar to his mother's, except he has better control over them and is able to choose when and how much power, life energy, and memories he absorbs via physical contact, or doesn't absorb in cases where he just, wants to make physical contact without using his powers. He can also absorb powers on a more permanent level, although he has less control it seems over when this happens. Like his father, he also seems to have some charm-based powers. Either that, or he's just charming. Number 2. Proteus. Proteus is the son of Moira McTaggart, who before I would count more as like an ex-ally, but with recent revelations, we can definitely consider her a member in the same way we might consider someone like Charles Xavier. It turns out that Moira herself was a mutant this whole time, possessing unique reincarnation powers. She has also been known for being a leader and teacher of X-Men groups before, including the time when she led a team that Professor X then recruited, sending them into Krakoa to rescue the original X-Men. Not Krakoa as we know it now, but Krakoa as it was back in the day when it was like a monster island. Proteus is Kevin McTaggart, son of Joseph and Moira McTaggart. He is currently one of the 5 on Krakoa, and his powers as part of that team are mainly used to warp reality, allowing the non-viable eggs that Egg, formerly known as Gold Balls, produces to become viable for life. These eggs are then used to grow new versions of fallen mutants. Proteus is an Omega level mutant who requires hosts to survive. Initially, Kevin had a body, but now he's basically just pure energy. The hosts he controls and feeds off of eventually are exhausted and killed by that energy drain, making him not just a powerful psionic mutant, but also a powerful energy vampire as well, unintentionally. Number 1. Legion. Legion is the son of Professor Charles Xavier that was conceived when he had a love affair with Gabrielle Haller, which is where Legion gets his legal last name, as his given name is David Haller. Legion is so powerful because he suffers from a severe dissociative identity disorder, where he has more than 100 100 personas residing within him. Each persona has a number, many have names, and they each have their own specific power set that show up whenever they take over. Because of this, there is almost nothing that Legion isn't capable of. He can manipulate matter and time. We've seen him time travel and completely warp reality as a result of his possible abilities. He also has some pretty powerful hair, which I gotta say, I'm happy that he still rocks even now in the current modern day comics. He's still got that sweet hair. So tall. Number 10, Madeline Pryor. I have a strong admiration for Madeline Pryor, one of the most captivating villains in the X-Men series. Maddie's backstory reveals what drives her actions, and despite her evil deeds, one cannot help but empathize with her. She's known as the Goblin Queen, and her dominant energy adds to her straight up allure. Maddie is a woman who always gets what she wants no matter the cost, which has led her to commit some seriously heinous acts. However, deep down, Maddie craves love and acceptance, and all her attempts to achieve this have only pushed her further away from it, sadly. She perfectly fits the quote, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." Maddie is deadly, dangerous, often unhinged, and filled with rage, but her backstory also makes her a very tragic character. It's hard, honestly, not to love her. She definitely deserves your love and admiration. Also, if you're wondering why I included her on this list, it's from experience. Whenever I cosplay as Madeline Pryor, I frequently get mistaken for DC Comics' Raven, so she's clearly not super well known. But, you know, I love her anyways. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love when we talk X-Men here on Top 10 Nerd, I know I do, be sure to head on over to our X-Men playlist for even more good X-Men content. Number 9, Mojo. Mojo is probably one of the freakiest villains we have for the X-Men. While fans of the comics may be familiar with him, more casual fans may not. He is from his own universe known as the Mojoverse. Here he runs his own television network and is obsessed with securing good ratings, making those who serve him perform on live broadcasts, and the performances he often demands from folks usually involve death-defying acts and other dangerous and deadly feats. So, pretty scary. Number 8, Unus the Untouchable. A villain who almost foiled the X-Men in their early days was Unus. Unus the Untouchable was a mutant who couldn't be touched by those who would do harm to him, making him seemingly invincible when he first came up against the X-Men in issue number 8 of the original series. His power was also weirdly specific, as it didn't repel all things from him and mainly seemed to target those who fought against him and projectiles that of course would do him harm. When Unus turned to a life of crime, Beast was the one to stop him by creating a device that intensified his power, causing everything to be repelled from Unus, including food. Starving, Unus eventually agreed to stay on the straight and narrow, and Beast returned his power levels to how they once were, allowing Unus to return to his wrestling career. Number 7, Carmela Unicione. Carmela Unicione is suspected to be the daughter of Unus the Untouchable. Carmela was one of the members of the Acolytes. She was loyal to Magneto, working specifically under Exodus during her time with his Acolytes. During her time with them, she faced multiple superhero groups, including, you guessed it, the X-Men. Number 6, Dirtnap. Dirtnap is a weird character, but one who kind of has a beautiful story. Dirtnap originally appeared as one of Genesis's Dark Riders, Tyler Dayspring's Genesis, to be clear. Dirtnap was a mutant who had the ability to absorb beings into himself, thereby basically adopting their form. However, you would know it was Dirtnap because of a red smiley face that would appear somewhere on him, either on his clothes or on his body while in that form. While fleeing from Wolverine, however, he absorbed a rat and became stuck, or perhaps just preferred this form, keeping it. Dirtnap would later on actually end up joining the X-Men, befriending Generation X, and even sacrifice his own life to protect them. However, we're now in the time of mutant resurrection, and more recently in the 2022 series of Marauders in issue number 6, Dirtnap was spotted spying on Lockheed, who was in turn spying on villain Brimstone Love's Theater of Pain. The indicator that he returned back to being evil was his smiley face. When he turned to good, it became yellow, but in that issue, it was back to being red. Number 5, Solemn. Solemn is one of the new X-Men villains on the block. Solemn is a mutant of Arakko who, instead of having adamantium bones, possesses adamantium skin. He was one of the sword bearers of Arakko during the Ten of Swords tournament. In fact, he was the one mutant we thought would face off against Wolverine, because, you know, adamantium bones, adamantium skin. But in an unexpected turn, Solemn didn't even really fight at all. He was initially set to fight against one of his own because this was Saturnine's tournament and honestly it was gloriously weird. Instead, Solemn used a favor owed to him by Wolverine from when they both had to venture to Hell to get their Muramasa blades so that they could enter the tournament and also use said blades in the tournament, making Wolverine tap in and fight on his behalf. Solemn is presented as being a smooth talker, master manipulator, and just overall trickster. Maybe that's why I like him so much. After Ten of Swords, we also see him as a rival of Wolverine. One thing is for sure, you should definitely never trust Solemn, based on what I've seen. Number 4, Pog or Pog. Pog or Pog is as weird as he sounds, which could be why you've never heard of him before, or it could just be because you weren't reading Ten of Swords like I told you to do before when it was all happening. Tisk tisk. For all those who missed out, Ten of Swords was an amazing X-Men crossover event. It was one of those classic true crossovers happening between multiple series with each issue adding a piece of the story. There was also a main series if you wanted the broad strokes, but that also of course perfectly tied into everything else. While it's a lot to read, I thought it was an amazingly done event all in all. Some parts are a bit goofy, some parts are more serious, and some are just downright epic. Pog or Pog as a new character and antagonist sits somewhere between the epic and goofy categories. Initially, he appears to be a giant crocodile-like beast from Morocco, but in the end, we learn that this is simply a powerful organic suit he wears, and that inside is the smaller and real Pog or Pog, who pilots the suit and is somewhat goblin-like in appearance in reality. Pog or Pog also has to rhyme all the time, which I like. Number 3, Spore. Spore was apparently a super ancient evil that was created by the Deviants way back as a weapon to be used against the Eternals. However, Spore didn't just do harm to Eternals, but to all living things it came in contact with. As such, Spore was condemned by the Celestials and killed long, long ago. Or so they thought. After appearing to have been destroyed, Spore actually lived on through the soil below, in the spot where he was defeated. Eventually, through this soil, he was able to return through substances that were grown in it and used for experimentation on people like Roughhouse. In fact, Roughhouse ended up being infected and had to be saved later on by Wolverine as a result. Wolverine and his mutant friend Bandera ended up fighting against Spore with some help from the people of Tierra Verde and Sister Salvation, who possibly herself was a mutant. It's not really fully established, but it's suggested. While defeated, a small piece of Spore would apparently survive, having resurfaced recently, albeit somewhat randomly, in the 2020 volume of Iron Man in issue number 22. So that's a thing. I don't think Spore's done anything yet, but he's still apparently around somehow. Number 2, the Viscora. The Viscora are more than just one character. They are a bunch of them. A whole race, if you will. They made their first appearance in 2020's Cable issue number 5, where they appeared as an antagonistic alien race. They have only made a handful of appearances, only appearing, I believe, in Knights of X since then, and 2 issues of that miniseries. The Viscora were the reason that Sword initially went offline and disappeared. Their goal is to travel the cosmos looking for new worlds to absorb into their collective consciousness, learning everything they can about them before completely cleansing said world, or possibly said universe, wiping out everything within its existence. This was their intention with Earth and the main continuity, but in Cable they were initially stopped by Kid Cable and his parents, Cyclops and Jean Grey. Number 1, Brimstone Love. Whether we're talking about the Brimstone Love of Earth 928 or the Brimstone Love of Earth 616, both are pretty obscure to be honest. The original Brimstone Love, who first appeared in the Earth 928 reality, only made 8 appearances, while the main continuity version of the character has only made 3 appearances. Both are the leader and man behind the Theater of Pain. Tragically, while Brimstone Love was a newer villain to the Earth 616 continuity, making his first appearance in the first annual issue number 1 of the second volume of Marauders from 2022, he also probably won't be seen again if you haven't seen him yet. This is because Brimstone Love perishes, or at least is believed to have perished, as of the end of the Marauders run, issue number 12. That Marauders run, volume 2, not the first volume. He has a really great design, and his sadism was interesting to see, especially in one who is so strong in his convictions. Number 10, Unis the Untouchable. Unis the Untouchable, what a wild character. An oldie and a goodie. Unis actually first appeared back in the original X-Men run, making his first appearance back in X-Men issue number 8, which after hundreds of X-Men issues is pretty old at this point. Unis himself is what he sounds like. His mutant powers allow him to become untouchable when he wishes, shielding him completely when activated. This psionic repulsion shield that he can create can be as thick or thin as he wants. Unis, whose current civilian name is Gunther Bane, has also been shown to be capable of reaching through the shield himself if needed, without dropping it entirely. Pretty powerful. It's not so powerful if someone comes and tries to make the shield something you have to deal with all the time, which is how they defeated him the first time though. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we are doing here, if you love obscure X-Men villains like me, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. Number 9. Nemesis. This character rose to notoriety under a different name and is commonly referred to and known by that codename, but we can't say it here on YouTube, so instead we're gonna go with this other name, Nemesis, which is also a very AOA name, so yeah. Nemesis is known in the Age of Apocalypse reality for being the son of Apocalypse. At least, the alleged son of Apocalypse. I think we pretty much know at this point. We also don't know who his mother is though, so that's still a mystery. But it probably wasn't the woman we now know as Apocalypse's wife in the main continuity thanks to modern X-Men books, Genesis. She's also kind of a confusing name for her to have in regards to Apocalypse's and X-Men history, but anyways. Nemesis, being an ally and horseman of Apocalypse, ends up being a major antagonist and problem for the X-Men in this universe, who are led by Magneto, as Professor X is dead in AOA, which is kinda, you know, what helped bring about this whole dread alternate reality of Earth 295, aka Age of Apocalypse. Number 8. Dark Riders. Oh boy, the Dark Riders. What a weird group. No wonder we haven't seen them that much. The Dark Riders are believed to be Inhumans who for some reason allied themselves with Apocalypse, seemingly believing in his vision of a mutant-dominated world and his ideology of survival of the fittest. I don't know how Apocalypse convinced them that this was a good idea, but they do seem to be pretty into it, I'd say, so I gotta assume that he was just like really persuasive and didn't just straight up threaten them. But still, it's a whole weird thing. The Dark Riders, they're weird. The original roster included team members Foxbat, Gauntlet, Tusk, Hard Drive, Synapse, and Barrage. I mean, I feel like that also just says it all. Listen to those names. The Dark Riders. Number 7. Cassandra Nova. I love Cassandra Nova. With every issue of Marauders I am reading, I fall more in love with this strange and terrifying character. Cassandra Nova is basically Charles Xavier's evil twin, but she's also not a straight up evil twin. She is what the Shi'ar would actually call a Mumadrai. The Shi'ar believe that Mumadrai are basically evil twin spirits of newborns who must be defeated before said person can be born. So the idea with that is that like basically we all before we were born fought an evil version of ourselves. They serve to represent the exact opposite of everything that we are. So in the case of Xavier, who is often presented as being a pretty good guy, though you know, not always, Cassandra is pretty evil in comparison. While Xavier did successfully defeat her before he came into the world with his telepathic mutant powers manifesting while he was in the womb, because of his own psionic potential, Cassandra herself was powerful enough to survive this and eventually would return years later to fight against Xavier and his beloved mutants. Although, in being Charles's twin, she herself is also basically a mutant, so yeah. She's a mutant, but she's also Mumadrai. Number 6. Nimrod. If we're talking about the new Nimrod, he is well known thanks to the current era, but even he is still somewhat obscure as an X-Men villain, considering that, you know, he hasn't been around for too long and only appears in a few issues at this point. However, even going back and talking about the more famous Nimrod from the Days of Future Past reality, for those who are not familiar, this could actually still be a version of the character who is considered obscure. The main Days of Future Past reality is often considered to be Earth 811, which is where Nimrod hails from. Here, and even in the current main timeline of Earth 616, Nimrod is considered to be a super sentinel, a super advanced mutant killing and detecting machine. So if you thought the Sentinels were bad, woo, wait till you meet Nimrod. He's crazy, even though his name is kinda dumb. That's why I love him though. Number 5. Harold Leland. Despite having recently returned, Harold is usually someone often left out when it comes to his involvement with the previous villainous group known as the Hellfire Club. Or well, you know, he's kind of more, he's like on the side. Like Harry's there, but maybe in the back. Well, really, the Hellfire Club has become 2 different entities at this point now as well, with one remaining pretty villainous and the other being a somewhat altruistic Krakoan-based business known as the Hellfire Trading Club. Prior to Harry's resurrection on Krakoa though, he was a pretty bad guy and member of the Hellfire Club, back when it was made up of villains, before it was, you know, just about business and mutants and all that stuff. Throughout many of his Hellfire days, Leland was often seen as the right-hand man to more well-known mutant villain Black King of the Hellfire Club, Sebastian Shaw. And those were also back in the days when the Hellfire Club just wanted to like rule the world. Although who knows, maybe the trading company does want to rule the world. That would be an interesting twist. Number 4, Charles Xavier II, or Charles Xavier II. Charles Xavier II is the child of Mystique and Professor X. Wait. What? Yep, at one point these two had a child together, and in the main continuity too. That happened. Well, we don't really know fully what happened to this child in the main continuity, who I feel like we kinda just forgot about, who Mystique also gave up for adoption, surprise surprise. We do know of an alternate version of the character who actually gets a bit of a story in the reality of Earth 13729, where he joins up with his half-brother Reyes and basically becomes a villain. So that's the version we're focusing on for this point. Charles Xavier II accidentally kills his adoptive mother when his powers emerge, causing him to seek out his birth mother, Mystique. However, she is no longer around because she has been killed at this point by his half-brother, Reyes. Charles II then decides to create his own team of X-Men, believing that the current team has disgraced his father's name, who is also dead at this point. However, he's not a very good guy at all, and instead of inspiring a team of mutants to, be better, he just uses mind control to get them to join him, giving them just enough awareness and control to kind of realize what's happening to them, but not enough that they can actually do anything about it. Yikes, that's really evil, man. That's really evil. Like, he could have just mind controlled them and been like, then you just won't be aware. But no, he was like, I want you to know what's happening. Number 3, Horticulture. Horticulture are such an awesome group of villain ladies. I really hope they do continue to appear for years to come and become super mainstream and not obscure. Like, I want to see them in the MCU. They deserve a live-action adaptation despite being pretty new. They made their first appearance in the 2019 X-Men series in issue number 3 and are a group of villainous women who plan to take over the world by controlling seeds and crops. In essence, they hope to drastically diminish the human population of Earth to return the world to a more natural state, thereby deciding through controlling seeds and crops as botanical scientists who will live and who will die. Number 2, Lucifer. Lucifer is another super old school villain who you may have forgotten about, or you never knew about to begin with perhaps. But you know who didn't forget? I didn't forget. I did not forget back when Professor X weirdly implied that Lucifer, as in maybe the devil at the time that he was bringing it up, was the one behind him losing the ability to walk. That happened at one point, and I was like, what is happening here? Now, Lucifer is not actually Satan though. He's not that Lucifer. He's actually an alien from outer space. I don't think it makes it better. Lucifer is a Quist from the planet Quistelium. He originally came to Earth to conquer it, but was foiled by Xavier, so he basically dropped a big rock on him. I'm not joking, that's pretty much what happened. Although initially implied to maybe be the devil, we later learn he is just a super advanced and intelligent alien dude. Though not too intelligent because, the X-Men do defeat him. Number 1, Cordyceps Jones. Cordyceps Jones is one of the newest villains to pester the X-Men. He actively fought against the most recently retired roster in the current run, before Forge, Firestar, Iceman, Magic, and Havoc joined the team. Cordyceps Jones, however, only recently went up against the X-Men, having targeted Earth by putting a bounty on it after encouraging people to gamble on its destruction at one of his massive cosmic casinos, Game World. Prior to that, he made his first appearance in the 2017 Rocket series in issue number 4, which is also why Rocket was the one to help the X-Men with finding Game World and infiltrating it. Thankfully, they had a direct link to him through a team member at the time, Rogue, whose husband Gambit is a fellow friend of Rocket's through their shared love of gambling. We also learned in their pursuit of Game World and Cordyceps Jones that Gambit's secret nickname for Rocket is Small Blind. Cordyceps Jones might be newer in the comics, having appeared in less than 10 issues at the time of this recording, but he's actually an ancient threat, being over 30,000 years old and also being a giant parasitic fungal spore. He and obscure Wolverine villain Spore actually could probably do some crazy damage should they ever team up. That would be pretty wild. If you're watching this and you're from Marvel, make that happen. That sounds like a cool team up actually. And now we know Spore is maybe alive.
At number 10 is Phoenix Force Magneto. In this reality, Magneto merged with the fiery cosmic force, forging a fearsome union. His quest to mold Hope Summers into a Phoenix host underscored his unrelenting will, defying warnings from the Avengers and X-Men alike. Yet this fusion spiraled into chaos, necessitating a coalition from Charles Xavier, the Hulk, and Wolverine to quell the cataclysm. The prospect of a Phoenix Magneto conjures an ominous blend, melding two extremes, the cosmic Phoenix Force and Magneto's unyielding darkness. Unlike others, Magneto swiftly succumbed to the Force's corrupting influence, illuminating his inherent malevolence. This accelerated plunge led to a world-shattering clash, sparing only Wolverine through Jean Grey's timely intervention. In a universe where Magneto harnesses the Phoenix, a realm-engulfing menace emerges. In defeat, this fusion echoes the staggering potency and unbridled havoc they embody, weaving a tale of mutant and cosmic might on an unprecedented scale. If you're enjoying the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 9 is Juggernautical. Juggernaut as a massive boat. Yeah, the multiverse is weird, you guys. Anyways, the Juggernautical, the seafaring behemoth, is unlike any other. See, this colossal ship being was no ordinary vessel. It was the marionette of a mystical book, a navigator of the arcane. But as fate would have it, this enigmatic tomb found its way into the clutches of none other than Admiral Harry Greik, a high-breaking officer of the Royal Navy. A perfect storm brewed as the Juggernautical set its course upon the Exiles, a group tasked with mending the threads of the multiverse, and the Juggernautical even crossed paths with the infamous Blackbeard. Yet, the winds of fortune are ever fickle. In a cinematic clash, Blink emerged as the hero of this otherworldly seafaring saga. With a flicker of teleportation mastery, she wrestled control of the book from the Greich's grasp and in an act of defiance, hurled it into the abysmal depths of the ocean. At number 8 is Sabretooth. I mean, it's a team up of Sabretooths from across the multiverse, so I'm calling the team the Sabretooth. In an alternate reality, a ferocious female Sabretooth is abducted by Graydon Creed, who's on a mission to eradicate versions of Sabretooth across the multiverse. She's imprisoned with other Sabretooths, all of whom have their power suppressed. Together they break free, confront Graydon, and after a fierce battle, banish him through a portal. United by their experience, they opt to stay in Earth 616, seizing a spaceship to embark on their own interdimensional adventure. At number 7 is Baron Sinister. Welcome to Battle World, a tapestry of twisted domains where alternate realities collide. Among these shards of existence, we find the enigmatic Baron Sinister ruling over his own dominion. Bar Sinister, a realm inhabited by clones and created by the Tyrant's hand. But clones can't be the only thing on this villain's menu, as he keeps a select few non-clones as playthings for his whims. Now Sinister and King Hyperion, two formidable forces, conspire against the House of Braddock of Higher Avalon. Exposed and accused of discord, Sinister faced trial under the gaze of God Emperor Doom's enforcers. A duel between Baron Sinister and Baron Braddock then ensued. Amidst the crumbling Doom's rule, Sinister, edged on by Captain Marvel, joined the rebellion, leading to clashes and a betrayal that culminated in his demise at the hands of Baron Apocalypse. At number 6 is Dark Phoenix Mystique. So this Mystique story is pretty familiar, shadowing the path of her mainstream self up until King Loki decides to give his brother Thor a run for his money with a Harley dose of suffering. During all this, Mystique decides it's time to settle her score with none other than Logan, aka Wolverine. She whips out this Phoenix Blaster, yeah, you heard me right, stealing away the Phoenix Force from him and spreading his body parts across the vast expanse of the multiverse. Her stint as the Dark Phoenix lands her a recruitment offer from the Multiversal Masters of Evil. These folks go on a multi-reality rampage, taking out prehistoric heroes left and right. Cue the showdown as they target Earth 616 prehistory. The prehistoric Avengers then team up with time-traveling counterparts for a 9-day cosmic brawl. But ultimately, Dark Phoenix Mystique faces her reckoning, confronting the forces of creation and meeting her end in the torrent of the first firmament. At number 5 is the Pyro Nightcrawler Chimera. Imagine a world where Pyro and Nightcrawler's DNA are blended together like a mutant smoothie. Now this flaming hot chimera finds itself in the company of the Legion of the Night, a group of shadowy teleporting amalgamations created by Mr. Sinister. Their latest escapade involves a rather daring ambush at the Sanctum Sanctorium, but hold on, there's a little bit of a twist. After Vox Ignis uses her Scream of Change to instill some morals and values into some of the clones, the reformed members of the Legion found themselves in a clash of ideologies with their steadfastly sinister comrades, and the inevitable showdown followed. A brawl that pitted reformation against loyalty, and well, I'm not gonna spoil the ending, but let's just say things got heated, pun intended. At number 4 is Sugarman. No, he's not a candy enthusiast or a pastry chef. This guy's got a rather unique set of powers that'll make him stand out in the rogues gallery. First up, let's talk about his powerful tongue. Now, I know what you're all thinking. How impressive can a tongue really be? You have no idea. Sugarman's tongue is no ordinary one. It's like a versatile tool of destruction, capable of piercing through almost anything. And I mean anything. We're talking stone, steel, and even beings in gaseous or liquid form. But that's not all, folks. Sugarman could do a bit of size and mass alteration transformation as well. He's got this nifty ability to control his own mass, which means he can shrink down if he wants to, and when he loses mass, he doesn't just vanish into thin air, it apparently gets sent off to some mysterious extra-dimensional space. Where exactly? Well, it's anyone's guess. Oh, and injuries are no biggie. He regenerates faster than you can say ouch. He's shrugged off blows that would even make Wolverine winced. Crushed by Colossus' boot? No problem. Beaten to a pulp with a metal pipe? Back on his feet. Impaled with multiple pieces of metal? Just a minor inconvenience. But here's where things get really interesting. Sugar Man isn't just brawn, he's got brains too. Super genius intelligence, in fact, particularly when it comes to all things genetics. At number 3 is Omega World Apocalypse. In the far alternate future of 3167 AD, civilizations crumble, races vanish, and the survivors, the Atlanteans and humans and the Stark Self, Wakandans, Mystics, and Moldoids, find themselves under the oppressive rule of Apocalypse in a place called Omega World, a sprawling structure where Apocalypse has essentially become the heart, turning what remained of Earth into what's essentially an extension of his body. His horsemen, now acting as sort of antibodies or white blood cells, would cleanse the Omega World of anything which would cause him harm. Long story short, Apocalypse gets himself a fatal knife to the back by Nightcrawler, causing Omega World to crumble. At number 2 is the Sky Whale Brood Queen. Okay, this one is super weird. So somehow on Earth 13371, Charles Xavier becomes an Akanti Sky Whale. I can't even look at it. For those listening, imagine a giant cosmic whale with fleshy skin and a pupilless human face. It's truly a bizarre sight to be seen. But things get even more bizarre as our good old Xavier Sky Whale hybrid gets taken over by none other than the Brood Queen, set out on conquering the Marvel Universe and using Xavier as a vessel to transport her alien brood. Now, despite being telepathically controlled by the Brood Queen, Xavier's mental fortitude allowed him to keep most of his powers a secret from her. After teleporting to Earth 616, the Brood Queen was exterminated by the extreme X-Men. Once freed, Char Whales Xavier, I like that one, Char Whales, no, asks Dazzler to end his life as he knew that in this form he was weak and could be dangerous if controlled by a more powerful mind. Get dumped on, Brood Queen. And at number 1 is President X. In this alternate universe, Charles Xavier, who never establishes Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, decides to become a politician instead. And yup, that's all it takes for Xavier to become the evil polar opposite counterpart to his 616 version, becoming completely wrathful, cruel, and a sadistically megalomaniacal tyrant desiring nothing but total control over everyone around him. Cause remember y'all, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Though he's never revealed to be a mutant himself, it's speculated that Xavier's telekinetic abilities aided him in tracking down mutants across the nation. A stark contrast to his Earth 616 counterpart, this Xavier exhibited an authoritarian and cruel rule, causing protests notably from billionaire Anthony Stark. The catalyst for change arrived as Stark formed the Avengers specifically to counter Xavier's regime. Unfortunately, Xavier's response proved devastating as a missile targeted the Avengers' Quinjet, obliterating its occupants. This tragic loss included iconic figures like Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, and other— Wait, Thor? Hold up, he took out Thor with a missile? Whoa, okay. With big players gone, Xavier's oppressive reign expanded further, with all mutants confined to a grim prison in Texas, subjected to his psychological torment and horrifically abusive tendencies, even torturing some of them to their demise while subjugating the survivors to cruel experiments in an effort to control their mutations for their own good. This dark incarnation of Xavier remains a chilling portrait of power-driven malevolence, unafraid to exercise a ruthless authority.
Number 10, Forearm. This villain was a member of the Mutant Liberation Front who frequently came up against members of the New Mutants and X-Force, as well as occasionally the X-Men. Although many of the other members of this team vary from appearance to appearance, Forearm is a mainstay of the group. So, what can he do? Well, he has some increased durability, strength, and stamina, but as the name would suggest, his main ability is that he has 4 arms. He eventually left the Mutant Liberation Front once he discovered that his fellow teammate and girlfriend Moonstone was really an undercover SHIELD agent. He was seen participating in the Bloodsport Championship, where he was killed by a member of the Serpent Society named Anaconda. But he later appeared alive and well with no explanation as a new member of a New Mutant Liberation team before eventually being welcomed to the New Mutant island of Koa and later joining Sword and Magic's Dark Riders.
Number 9, Mr. Sinister. It feels strange putting Mr. Sinister so low on this list, considering how truly unbelievable he is. I mean, just look at him. And then go back and look at his first appearance. Remember when Sinister had sharp teeth? That was a time. Mr. Sinister has always been an unbelievable villain, not just because of his striking and unusual appearance, but because of his obsession with the Summers family, particularly Scott, and later because of his long-standing involvement with both the Summers and the Greys, as well as an origin that attached him to them when they traveled to the past, as well as an origin that tied him to Apocalypse. And now it's gotten even more unbelievable, with Mr. Sinister not just being one, but possibly existing as 4 separate entities, each belonging to their own unique race. Like, what is even happening with this man? He's crazy. At least no matter how unbelievable he continues to get, he will always look fabulous while doing it. That is something that I think in the comics is a guarantee. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not click that subscribe button? We know a lot of you are not subscribed, and you know what? Every time you click that subscribe button, a host gets their wings. So if you click it, maybe I'll just randomly start sprouting wings. Might not be on camera, but it'll happen eventually.
Number 8. Skinless Man. One of the more visually repellent villains on this list, Skinless Man was originally Harry Pizer, a mutant during the Cold War with elastic and multisensory skin, which allowed him to be an efficient spy and member of the Weapon Plus program. They augmented his strength and made his skin more durable and elastic and gave him the name Weapon 3. He was sent to obtain a weapon called the Orb of Necromancy, but was shot and left for dead by Phantom X and captured by the Captain Britain Corps, who removed his skin. Phantom X later stole his skin to create bullets that were sentient and therefore never missed. Pizer taught his muscle to imitate the powers his skin had had and became a villain, being recruited to the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He typically fights X-Force rather than the X-Men, but honestly, potato potato. He is pretty unbelievable just because, I mean, look at him. What the hell? He eventually died in Uncanny X-Force number 34.
Number 7. Cassandra Nova. Cassandra Nova is one of the strangest, but also maybe in a weird twist, greatest X-Men villains ever. She is the evil twin of Professor Xavier that we never knew existed originally. But really, she isn't like a straight up evil twin. She is what's known as a Mumadrai, which is an evil reflection of ourselves. The alien race known as the Shi'ar believe we must fight and defeat our Mumadrai in order to be born successfully into the world. Yeah, it's a pretty wild concept. And also a weird one to apply to an Earthling like Xavier or even other people on Earth, considering, you know, this is a Shi'ar belief and ultimately a kind of a Shi'ar thing. But who says that Shi'ar's beliefs can't be true for other planets or Earthlings, I guess? Especially when Xavier would grow up to have such close ties to the Empire, even at one time becoming the consort of Lilandra Naramani, the ruler and magistrix of the Shi'ar Empire. And it gets even weirder. Not only did Professor X defeat Cassandra in the womb before being born, meaning his X gene was activated in utero, but she also somehow survived this encounter, likely thanks to the strength of the man that she was a doppel of. Cassandra survived for years as basically a kinda like a puddle of goo and would eventually return. And she's still around now, having been cured of her hatred towards mutants and even teaming up with the Mutant Marauders hero team on Krakoa in the modern day, which also is super weird, but I love it.
Number 6. Mojo. So, Mojo is a member of a race called the Spineless, who can't move without the help of motorized platforms. They were all driven insane by waves of energy that turned out to be television signals. Their government is based on the structure of the television industry, and Mojo is its leader, calling the world Mojo World and their universe the Mojoverse. Everyone on Mojo World is addicted to a gladiator-like sports show, and Mojo does everything he can to keep the ratings up. Some of his more infamous plots were when he replaced Psylocke's eyes with cameras so he could broadcast everything she saw to his people, or when he transformed the X-Men into children and later cloned them and made the X-Babies, who he hoped he could control. Honestly, every sentence about this guy makes less sense than the last, and his entire deal seems to be just really broad and surface level criticism of the entertainment industry, so I'm just gonna move on now.
Number 5. Lucifer. Lucifer has always been a really weird one for me from the comics, another enemy to Professor Charles Xavier. This nemesis was originally attributed with paralyzing Charles, forcing him to be confined to a wheelchair. Initially, it was implied through mysterious illusions that Lucifer may actually be Satan himself. This was when Charles left the X-Men team in the care of Cyclops when he went on his own mission. Xavier did this following the students' graduation from his school, believing they were ready to be left on their own when it came to heroics, leaving Cyclops in charge. When Cyclops did reach out to him during his mission, Charles answered, as we saw in the comics, from a dark dark, kind of fiery looking cavern that he seemed to be lowering himself further into. There wasn't actual fire in these panels, I don't think, but definitely I feel like there was some red lighting happening. Also, the fact that the character's name was Lucifer, who Charles was in pursuit of. However, we later learned that Lucifer was not in fact Satan incarnate, but instead an alien trying to help his race conquer the Earth? Huh?
Number 4, Mammomax. Maximus Jensen's mutation is very off and kind of vague. He is a man who was either born or transformed into an elephant man. He has big tusks which he uses to attack his foes, has the strength of an elephant, which I guess kinda goes without saying, and has nearly invulnerable skin. Like all elephants, he has the ability to spit acid at people as well. What's that? Elephants don't do that? Well then, that's kind of a random ability for him to have, isn't it? He was a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, joining because he thought he'd get to hang out with tough Magneto-trained mutants. He was disappointed with the roster he got stuck with, and was presumably even more disappointed when he and the Brotherhood got stranded in Mojo World. He was eventually captured by the Facility, where he was eaten by a monster, but he was later resurrected by the Five in Krakoa. Now, I have no issue with an elephant villain, but the idea of someone being mutated to just be an elephant is pretty unbelievable, even for the X-Men.
Number 3, Moira McTaggart. Possibly one of the most shocking villains on our list is Moira McTaggart. Moira isn't unbelievable in the sense of being ridiculous or being weird, she is more shocking in the fact of her actual allegiances and origins, which have recently been revealed. For years, Moira has been established as a friend of the X-Men, a human ally who believes that mutants deserve equal rights. But we would later learn the truth, that Moira herself is actually a mutant. And then we'd later learn again that despite her actually also being a mutant, which you'd think would make her more allied with the X-Men, she is no longer an ally to the X-Men, but one of their #1 enemies. What? Moira would even join up with the deadly and influential organization known as Orchis, which aims to put an end to mutants in an effort to preserve and safeguard humanity. Moira herself has kind of been stripped of her mutant genes and powers and turned into a bit of a cyborg, but this hasn't stopped her from continuing in her fight against mutant kind, in a shocking comic book twist.
Number 2, Nimrod. Nimrod here comes from the Days of Future Past alternate future, where mutant hunting sentinels controlled North America. He is an advanced prototype of the program who tried to follow Rachel Summers into the past after her and Kate Pryde were discovered during a sabotage mission. He ended up undershooting his destination by about 20 years, where he killed Storm and forced Forge to build him a time machine, which took him to the current Marvel timeline, where he came into contact with and fought the X-Men on several occasions, eventually merging with the remains of the Master Mold and becoming Bastion. What I find so unbelievable about the character is that anyone would be scared of someone called Nimrod. In case you are not aware, Nimrod was the name of a legendary and skilled hunter from the Bible, so it is obviously implying that this Nimrod is designed to hunt mutants really efficiently. However, because Bugs Bunny would often sarcastically refer to Elmer Fudd as Nimrod in the old Looney Tunes cartoons, its meaning evolved in the general lexicon to mean an idiot. So as unbelievable as it sounds, a cartoon bunny has made me incapable of viewing this villain as threatening, because to the general public, he is calling himself an idiot.
Number 1, Ice Cream. Ice Cream has to be one of the weirdest mutant villains of all time, considering that his plan was to basically use his mutant power to turn into ice cream and then infiltrate the X-Men, and I guess I'm not really sure what his plan was here. He basically wanted revenge on the X-Men because he was jealous of how amazing their abilities were in comparison to his own. So I don't know how he thought he was gonna do that, because he's just a guy that could turn into ice cream, but yeah. Ice Cream was a very short-lived villain, not appearing specifically in X-Men, but simply as a villain to the team in issue number 1 of Obnoxio the Clown, which in all regards is also an extremely unbelievable comic that happened. In the end, his plan failed dramatically and he got eaten by the clown who had been hired to come and celebrate Kitty Pryde's birthday. This is a strange time for everyone, but I imagine it was especially a strange time for Ice Cream. Also, I don't think he turns into a full ice cream. He also turns into a sundae, which, how is that? Is that part of it? Is he the banana as well? I am the banana. Number 10, Orchis. Orchis is by far one of the most important, newest X-Men villainous groups that you need to know. If there is anything you take away from this list, this team should be one of them. Orchis is basically the group trying to do such dastardly things as create the Mother Mold so that they have an endless supply of Sentinels channels to help defend humanity against the ever-growing threat of mutants. Orchis is also surprisingly made up and funded by other organizations, some of which are more villainous in terms of their heritage, while others are actually known for being more heroic instead. Orchis made their first appearance early on in House of X issue number 1 back in 2019. They were created by Jonathan Hickman and Pepe Larraz. Number 9. Horticulture. One of my all-time favorite new villainous groups to hit the scene. Horticulture is a team of extremely scientific botanists who made the decision to revolt against the corporations that they worked for. Their members also just so happen to be elderly ladies. Their plan is to reclaim the earth and revive it as it is dying because of the very industries that they worked in. They aim to take control of plant life so that they can decide who gets fed and who gets dead, controlling the world through the food supply, basically. They also have big beef with the X-Men. Horticulture made their first appearance in the 2019 X-Men series in issue number 3. Horticulture was created by Jonathan Hickman and Lionel Francis Yu. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want to support us in other ways, be sure to head on over to our Facebook page and click that like. It really does help us out. Like, follow? I think it's like. Click like. Number 8. Pale Girl. The Pale Girl was one of the first villains we'd come up against in the current newest run of Wolverine. That is volume 7 overall of the Wolverine series, the 2020 series, what I'm talking about here. I can't believe it's been over 2 years since this series started. That is madness to me. The Pale Lady was initially believed to be a hallucination brought on by drugs, but was later revealed to be herself a mutant, Meredith Milley, whose powers allowed her to control the minds of others. It was also revealed that she was the one behind the flower cartel, which was illegally transporting and selling a powerful drug made from the pollen of Krakoan flowers. The Pale Girl first made her appearance in the 2020 Wolverine series in issue number 1. She was created by Benjamin Percy and Adam Kubert. Number 7. Hominis Verendi. Hominis Verendi are an enemy to all mutants, but their main beef lies with the Marauders. The Marauders are one of my favorite mutant teams, especially among the new books that we've had. Honestly, one of the best books around, I think, just in general. If you haven't read Marauders yet, you need to do that. Hominis Verendi is actually made up of a group of kids who were once members of the Hellfire Club's inner circle, but they aren't the only ones to join the Hominis Verendi, although they are the main folks as they pretty much run it as the kings and queens of that organization. Well, the Hellfire Club itself has become much more altruistic and is now run by Emma Frost, Captain Kate, formerly known primarily as Kitty Pryde, and Sebastian Shaw. Hominis Verendi is like their evil reflection. They seek to destroy mutant kind and Krakoa's reputation. Number 6. Swordbearers of Arakko. The Swordbearers of Arakko were the chosen sword-bearing champions who fought on the side of Arakko and Amenth against Krakoa in the Otherworld tournaments. Overall, they performed very well in the contest between those two nations, even considering how bizarre some of Saturnine's challenges and competitions were. Like a fashion show. That was a thing that happened. They were led by Genesis as Annihilation and joined by Bay the Blood Moon, Death and War of the original Four Horsemen, Apocalypse and Genesis' children, Iska the Unbeaten, Genesis' sister, Pog Urpog, one of my favorites, Redroot the Forest, Solemn, Summoner, grandson to Apocalypse and Genesis, the son of War, and White Sword of the Ivory Spire. They made their first appearance in the 2020 Wolverine series in issue number 6, and were first referred to in Ten of Swords Creation, issue number 1. The group was created by Jonathan Hickman and Tinny Howard. Number 5. Tarn the Uncaring. Tarn has been a major antagonist throughout the modern X books. Honestly, he's so terrifying. I think he deserves to be a villain to many different mutant supers. He's shown up in both Hellions, acting as a villain against fellow villain, who's still kind of villainous but is supposed to be on the good side, Mr. Sinister, and his team of unlikely heroes, the Hellions. The poor Hellions. I miss them. Tarn also fought against Storm, who has become regent of planet Arakko, formerly known as Mars. Don't worry though, Storm beat him in combat, because Storm's a badass. Even though Tarn sits on the Great Ring of Arakko, their governing body, he still seems like he's always planning something terrible. He's basically like the Arakko version of Sinister, which makes him infinitely more dangerous and overall worse. Tarn made his first appearance in Hellions issue number 6 in 2020 and was created by Zeb Wells and Carmen Carnero. Number 4. Nameless the Shapeshifter Queen. While this villain was pretty short-lived, especially considering how hype she seemed. I mean, she is called the Shapeshifter Queen. She is still a pretty important villain for you to be familiar with if you are a fan of X-Man Storm. Storm has been doing a lot of cool stuff lately in the comics, but one of the most epic things to have come her way has been taking her seat as Regent of planet Arakko, and becoming a queen in a sense once more. Regent. Sorry, Storm. In order for her to earn her seat among the rest of the Great Ring of Arakko, she had to take down Nameless. The two fought to determine if Storm would take the seat, and Storm actually won the fight. She offered mercy to Nameless, but instead, the Shapeshifter Queen decided to use Storm's power, as she had adopted Storm's form in battle, to end her own life. Which seems to have stuck with Storm, who was caught lost in thought thinking back to that battle in X-Men Red issue number 1. Nameless made her first appearance in the 2021 Sword series in issue number 8. She was created by Al Ewing and Goyo Villanova. Number 3. Severe Blackmore. Severe Blackmore is a new villain who recently appeared in Wolverine. He becomes an enemy to Logan after Wolverine tracks him down to learn more about Solemn. Solemn is believed to have stolen Wolverine's Muramasa blade, which is why Wolverine's trying to track him down. Wolverine and Solemn seemingly team up to take down Severe, but instead Solemn betrays Wolverine, giving him the slip and leaving him to face Severe alone. Fortunately, Wolverine does beat the big Iraqi pirate and even gains possession of Blackmore's beloved and, in Emma's opinion, grotesque ship. Severe made his first appearance in the 2020 Wolverine series in issue number 14. He was created by Benjamin Percy and Adam Kubert. Number 2. Moira X. While Moira McTaggart has been known for years as an ally to mutant kind, the whole line of X books kind of changed the way that we see her. Way back in the days of Dawn of X, within House of X, we learned that Moira was actually a secret mutant herself. Her powers allowed her to reincarnate, meaning after she died, she would be born in the same body again, getting to live out her life once more with the knowledge of the previous lives that she'd lived before that. Moira, upon learning she was a mutant in one of her past lives, sought a cure for her condition, wanting to be normal, and to give that option to other mutants the world over that maybe, just wanted to be normal. However, Destiny and Mystique stopped her, blowing up her lab and killing her with fire, warning Moira that creating a cure wouldn't be so easy, and that she was naive to think that it would only be offered to those who wanted it. As such, Moira made other more discreet plans for how to kinda end mutant kind, because she didn't really like it, even though she kind of pretended to like it. By building a paradise for the mutants, that was her plan. She orchestrated this in her current life, with her overall objective kind of being to separate mutants and create the perfect society where they could slowly die out. When Destiny returned, however, she and Mystique saw right through Moira and revealed that she was still, just as ever, an enemy to mutant kind. So despite the fact that Moira is an older character, this revelation of her being a potential antagonist for mutants was pretty new. These revelations came to light in the Inferno series in 2022. Number 1. Albert Carey. Albert Carey is one of the newest villains on the scene and has recently made his first appearance in the X-Force 2022 annual. Here he appears as a scientist working for Orchis. That's right, it all comes back to Orchis in the end, baby. While we don't know too much about him, as he just made his first appearance, he did go up against Wolverine, Domino, and Quentin Quire's Kid Omega. His plan was to do a short burst of tests on the captured mutants after luring them into a trap. He planned on them dying during said tests, but on keeping the data of said tests to learn from, basically. Well, they stole the motherboard, which stored information for the potential devices and stratagems they were testing. Albert Carey, who seemingly ran the test, is confident that with time, they can actually rebuild what they lost, and more vital, they now actually have more information, which opens up new knowledge and possible future questions and experimentation as a result. We don't really fully know what he's up to, but he seems to be testing a new weapon, and from what we've seen of Orchis, you can bet that this is likely just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what Carey and Orchis will have in store. I'm sure we will see him again. We'll definitely see Orchis again, that's for sure. Number 10. Vanisher. An old school villain who also almost single-handedly defeated the X-Men back in the day. Almost. So close. Well, actually he kind of did defeat the X-Men team, but fortunately Professor X butt in to save the day. And he was only able to defeat Vanisher by wiping his mind and making him forget who he was and what he was capable of, which I think goes to show just how powerful of a villain he is. He was the first teleporter the team really encountered, proving just how crazy powerful teleporters are. Vanisher is also considered to be a super fast teleporter, teleporter, and his power limits thus far have been pretty much undefined, even when he did resurface years later. I would consider him to be at a higher level though, just based on what I've seen thus far. He also was able to teleport himself safely just instinctually, even when teleporting to a place he's never seen or been to before, avoiding teleporting partially or fully into any solid objects, which of course could kill him, and which is like a great danger if you're a teleporter. You just teleport somewhere and now part of you's in a car and you're like, well, I guess I'm dead now. That's it. Number 9. Living Diamond. Okay, so someone I also think we need to talk about who needs some kind of redemption in the comics is Jack Winters, aka Jack O'Diamonds, or Living Diamond. He was one of the first X-Men villains whom Professor X saved Scott Summers from, thereby recruiting him to his X-Men team. Living Diamond's mutant power was believed to be radiation resistance, but he was also shown to be able to teleport short distances, had telepathy, and had a diamond form. Does that sound familiar at all? Telepathy with a diamond form. Somehow Living Diamond was way too easily defeated by a vibration beam which shattered him. I know Living Diamond is dead now and was undead at one point, but I really feel like considering how OP Emma Frost has become, Living Diamond should also get a second chance to prove just how powerful he in theory should be. I mean, if you got all that, how were you so easily defeated? And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more lists like it where we talk about the unexpected yet powerful villains that we don't usually get to talk about, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8. Arcade. Arcade is one of those villains who feels super ridiculous with his grandiose plans for Murder World, but in reality when he actually manages to achieve plots like Murder World, he's actually quite scary. I mean, getting a sneak peek into just what a ludicrous and horrifying operation he'd run in Hellions really made me appreciate just how dangerous Arcade can be if he does manage to get enough hostages, that is, to control people into working with him so he can create his Murder World. In Hellions number 9, it's revealed that the trap Mastermind walked the Hellions, and prior to that Mr. Sinister, into was a trap laid by Arcade himself. Gasp, what a reveal. Arcade's plan was to use Sinister's Hellions as leverage to encourage Sinister to work for him. Sinister didn't really seem to actually care about the Hellions, and he basically just agreed outright, although Arcade still chose to forcefully remove some of his teeth for fun before putting him to work. He wanted Sinister to make clones for him for Murder World, and had his plan worked, it would have been a real horror show. However, Sinister made a counteroffer to Mastermind, and instead the two double-crossed Arcade. Still, that whole 3-issue arc made me believe in the power of Arcade. Like, if he has the right allies, he could be really crazy. I'm here for some sort of plot where Arcade tries to just turn the world into Murder World or something. If that hasn't happened yet, someone write that for me, please. Maybe I should write that down. Maybe I should write that. I don't know. Marvel, call me. I got ideas apparently. Number 7. The Blob. The Blob is a villain that we don't often get to talk about on these supervillain lists. He tends to fall by the wayside, but truly he's pretty unstoppable. And when he puts his mind to something, or when he puts his body to something, he's a terribly tough villain to defeat or even move. The Blob was one of the first villains to appear in the original X-Men series, and when he did, he gave the team of youngsters a really tough time. He also attacked them with a circus. The Blob actually didn't start out as a villain, but became one due to the influence of Professor X and the X-Men themselves. Also, just thinking back and the amount of times that the X-Men have fought circuses or been trapped in circuses, or that happens a lot. That's like a recurring theme. Initially, the X-Men attempted to recruit the Blob, but after the Blob refused to accept their offer, he managed to escape before Xavier could wipe his mind of their identities. This caused problems later on down the road, but really it was how the X-Men treated him after he refused to join, and kind of his own self-esteem, and then later his overcompensating sense of superiority that turned him into a villain. I wonder if the Blob actually could have been an ally if this whole scenario had just gone a little bit differently. The Blob is super strong, durable, and virtually immovable thanks to his ability to manipulate gravitational mass, which is pretty powerful. He also later gained a secondary mutation which gave him a liquid form, but he hasn't really exhibited a ton of control with his secondary power set. But he also has liquid form. That's on the resume of powers now. Number 6. Red Death. Also known as Kandra, Red Death currently has a very Scarlet Witch looking vibe going on, and I gotta say, I'm feeling it. And just like Scarlet Witch, she is not someone who you should underestimate. Kandra is part of the Externals, and while she isn't one of the most memorable of that mutant villain team, she's still someone someone who is super powerful. Technically, just being an external comes with a pretty big dose of power. The Externals, not to be confused with Marvel's Eternals, a different team entirely, are a group of immortal mutants basically. They have had various roles throughout history. One more prominent one that folks might remember Kendra from is her role as benefactress, when we learned of her history with Gambit and the Thieves and Assassins Guilds of New Orleans during Gambit's miniseries. In fact, that was actually where Kendra first was introduced in the comics, making her initial appearance in Gambit issue number 1 from the 1993 miniseries. Although the way they approach that introduction, you wouldn't necessarily maybe know that that was her first appearance, because she kind of shows up like, you know me, I'm Kendra. And I'm like, do we know you? Who are you? But it's alright, she's pretty powerful. Number 5. Moira X. Moira was at one point powerful enough to have almost successfully wiped out all mutants. If it weren't for Mystique and Destiny, she would have succeeded. Even though she claimed during that past life that she only intended to create a cure to offer it to those who wanted it, Destiny knew that any mutant cure would essentially become weaponized and then forced on mutants, regardless of their own wants and desires. For those who haven't been reading along recently with the events of the current X-Men line of comics, it was revealed that Moira herself was actually a mutant whose powers were basically reincarnation in her own form. Basically, she dies and then she comes back to life as like a baby and lives her life again. But when Moira dies, she ends up being reborn as herself, but with all the memories of that past life. As such, Moira wasn't just a dangerous potential villain for the X-Men, but kind of the whole of 616, which also seems to be tied to Moira's current life, which I believe is her 10th life. Pretty crazy stuff. Moira is no longer a mutant after being cured in the 2021 Inferno series when Mystique shot her with a gun of Forge's design, which basically turns mutants into humans. But she still is a dangerous woman with a lot of information. And it was heavily implied that the creation of Krakoa was kind of all about eventually ridding the world of mutants over time, with Krakoa being like their last hurrah in terms of Moira's plan. Time will tell if Moira becomes more villainous, but I wouldn't be surprised if she did, just based on where she was heading in this story. And when or if that does happen, you better watch out. Danger is the Danger Room. The Danger Room is a villain who surfaced because they were basically being mistreated by Professor X, who had decided to ignore the fact that the training room had become sentient and was itself a technologically based mutant. Eventually, Danger decided, enough of this shit. It's time to get some sweet, sweet revenge. The crazy thing about Danger is, although we don't think of her too much, she really would be a pretty strong opponent to the X-Men, considering she trained them, and as such would know their strengths and weaknesses. In fact, I think that even is mentioned in the comics at one point. She was also considered to be an extinction level threat that caused Steve Rogers great worry in Heroic Age X-Men, which is kind of like a glimpse into his like tactical commentary diary. So if you wanted to read that, it exists. So despite not thinking about Danger too much, we all probably should, in case she ever decides to, you know, go the villain route again. Destroy everyone, because she could probably do that. Extinction level, friends. Number 3, Mystique. Mystique is someone who isn't particularly or at least outwardly powerful when it comes to what she's capable of or her power set, and for this reason, many people have taken to underestimating her abilities. Here's why we'd advise against that. Inferno, issue number 4. In the newest Inferno series, it's revealed that while Mystique tried to play by Krakoa's rules, when she learned she wasn't going to get what she wanted from Magneto and Professor X, no matter what she did in the name of the Mutant Nation, she decided to take matters into her own hands, as Mystique so often does. Disguising herself as many different people, she was able to easily ensure that Destiny was resurrected, against the wishes of the heads of the Quiet Council. She also put into motion plans to make sure that Destiny would garner a spot on the Quiet Council, and then she almost was successful in enacting revenge on Moira X for keeping her love, Destiny, from her. Mystique here proves that not only is her power set OP, but really that her mind and sense of cunning is what makes her so dangerous, and definitely not someone to be underestimated. Number 2, Destiny. Destiny has to be one of the most underestimated villains in recent years in comics. We have seen her resurface as a considerably dangerous villain in the current X books, and I'm personally loving it. Destiny was dead for quite a few years and actually got to mostly stay dead for much of them. Her mutant power allows her to see potential futures. She can see things that might come to pass, and it seems as though the more likely the future becomes, the clearer her vision of it is. She can also see more immediate futures when in the middle of a conflict. It was because of this power and Moira's personal grudge against and fear of Destiny that she remained unresurrected. But something you really shouldn't underestimate when it comes to Destiny is the power of love. Mystique was already told by Destiny before her death that if there came a time when mutants could be resurrected and they refused to bring her back, that Mystique should basically burn this new world to the ground. And Mystique's love of destiny gave her the motivation to basically bring Krakoa to its knees with her machinations to not only return destiny but also put her in a position of power. Precogs and love are a powerful mix. Number 1. Madeline Pryor. Of course, I have to include the Goblin Queen. Madeline Pryor is a woman who seems to easily be forgotten and shelved, which is surprising considering how great of a threat she posed in the original Inferno event. Currently in the comics, Madeline Pryor is making a comeback, returning at the end of the Hellion series after being killed as part of the comic's first arc. The Madeline Pryor that was killed was definitely feeling pretty evil and threatened to destroy the entire Hellions team before they even started. The returning Madeline, who has been resurrected by the Five, is at least putting on appearances that she's more level-headed, but in reality it seems the dark side of her still bubbles just beneath. Madeline Pryor has threatened the entire world with her dark rituals and demon pacts before, and she's a clone of Jean, so although she often gets forgotten and downplayed, she really shouldn't be considering just how dangerous and powerful she is, because Jean is also that and Maddie is also that too. She has the potential at least. Often people try to downplay Maddie because she's a Sinister created clone, but that feels very unfair to me. She's also got like a spark of the Phoenix Force in her, so should that count for something? I think so.
Kicking off the list at number 10. Juggernaut. Kane Marco made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12, when Kane and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, but when Kane was under fire, he ran off to take cover in a nearby cave. The cave was actually home to the lost temple of Cyttorak. So Kane grabbed this glowing ruby from the lap of an idol. Apparently he's never seen an Indiana Jones movie. He read the inscription. Apparently he's never seen a horror movie. And he possessed the power of the Crimson Bands of Cyttorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. Then an explosion went off, and then Kane the Juggernaut was now trapped under the rubble, and Xavier just took off. So after Kane dug himself out, he destroyed an entire village, with the previous man who had held the Juggernaut mantle, Jin Taiko, being destroyed as well. Now at one point he joined the X-Men and accepted Xavier's offer to live at the Xavier school. After a young boy he befriended named Sammy meets his fate, Kane embraces the Cyttorak energies once again and went back to his villain ways. And before we go on to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be great. It helps the studio out quite a bit. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to this X-Men list. Number 9, Mystique. Raven Darkholme made her first comic book debut in Miss Marvel issue 16 back in 1978. So she's been around for quite a while, although most of her history is quite secretive. Her powers are quite interesting and first came to be when she was around 12 years old. Now one of those powers being of course that she can metamorph. So she can shapeshift into literally anybody, doesn't matter what size, age, gender, whatever the case. She's so good at shapeshifting and becoming somebody else that she can even copy your retina patterns and of course your fingerprints. So she can definitely get into your phone in numerous ways. She constantly betrays the X-Men. She's so flippy floppy. She joins the team for selfish reasons and then she leaves all over again. It's part of the thing. Number 8, Colossus. Making his first debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, Colossus grew up in Russia with his brother Miko and sister Alina. And when a runaway tractor was about to take out Alina, he saved her life with his powers. And then of course that got the attention of Charles Xavier. So he joined Charles in his school, and then when the legacy virus took the life of Alina, that plus the fact that he was stuck in this giant metal mode, stuck in the X-Men mansion, it was his mental breaking point. He tipped to the dark side. He left and figured the best place to be was with the Acolytes, with Magneto and Avalon. Number 7, Wolverine. Wolverine has had a pretty crazy past, so it's no surprise that he's gone down a few dark roads in his time. In the movie Logan, for example, we see two Wolverines battle it out, and it's so gory and so wonderful. But in the comic Age of Apocalypse, Logan goes from being an X-Men to the Horseman of Death. Yeah, Apocalypse actually had Wolverine square up against Sabretooth in order to see who becomes this new Horseman. Wolverine came out on top and Apocalypse restored the adamantium to his skeleton. Upgrade time, let's do it. And to make matters worse, Apocalypse replaced Wolverine with a scroll so the X-Men wouldn't notice. Now of course there's many more X-Men who have become Horsemen of the Apocalypse, such as number 6, Gambit. Making his first appearance in Uncanny X-Men 266, Remy LeBeau was a mutant child who was kidnapped from the hospital by members of the New Orleans Thieves Guild. So off the bat, not a happy start to his life. They referred to him as the White Devil. So before he joined the X-Men, he had a pretty shady past, and after he had become a member, it was revealed that before he had worked for Mr. Sinister, and Gambit was actually the one who was responsible for putting the Marauders into the New York sewers where the mutant massacre happened. So Okay. He was also one of Apocalypse's 4 horsemen, like I said previously. He took the place of the horseman Death, and he even refused any sedation during this process in order to make sure Apocalypse doesn't toy with his mind. What a badass. Dude's hardcore. His original plan during this was to keep an eye on Apocalypse from the inside, but the transformation did alter his intentions as well. He ended up rescuing his old self when he remembered his love for Rogue, and he claimed he was both Death and Gambit at the same time. What a troubled man. Number 5, Bishop. Lucas Bishop. He is a time traveler from a dystopian future, and his goal was to travel back in time to the past in order to stop an unknown traitor amongst the X-Men. Interesting, very interesting. So he's come from that dark future to change it. Sounds like a good way to mix things up, that's for sure. Now this was when most of the mutant population is depowered by the Scarlet Witch. Then the child Hope was born, the first mutant born since. Well, it turns out that this kid is the reason Bishop is going back. See, that kid would end up taking millions of lives in the 6-second war. So Bishop tries to take out the child, which makes him the traitor all along. Time travel hurts my head, oh my god. So Cable, another time traveler from a different future, protects Hope. Bishop fails at taking out Hope, but he does take down Cable, creating a new future where Cable is remembered as a hero for protecting the child, and Bishop was remembered as the villain. That's tragic and also very confusing. Number 4, Archangel. Warren Worthington III. He started out as the accustomed hero known as the Avenging Angel. And then once Xavier got his attention, he recruited him as the 3rd of the 5 founding members of the X-Men, alongside Cyclops, Iceman, Beast, and Marvel Girl. He developed a pair of feathered wings that grew out of his back, giving him the ability, of course, to fly. He became a member of X-Factor alongside other X-Men, but he lost his wings thanks to Cameron Hodge. See, Apocalypse saw this and he took advantage of the hero. He brainwashed him and turned him into Archangel, the first horseman of death in the comics. He eventually broke free of Apocalypse's control, but over the years he would flip-flop back and forth into the evil hands of Apocalypse. He at one point actually had almost replaced Apocalypse after his death. Yeah, he's a force you do not want to mess with. Number 3, Cyclops. Scott Summers has been a leader of the X-Men since the beginning. He carries the knowledge that Xavier gifted him when he was a teenager. He was always struggling to control his powers growing up, and his history is pretty tragic. So when Scott and Emma became the new co-headmasters of the school, Cyclops led the X-Men, and he was doing a pretty good job. He was working to destroy this negative image that the public gave the X-Men. And as time went on, the X-Men name was being tarnished, so he thought it was best to separate mutants from humanity. Yeah, he thought he'd separate them and then rule the mutants on an island nation known as Utopia. Magneto even gives him props for uniting all the mutants. I mean, this is a big deal for him. This starts going south in the Schism storyline, where Cyclops sends out child soldiers on these assassination missions. He has the mindset that mutants need to train to be soldiers rather than students, but they're like 12 years old, so it's like, okay. Eventually the team gets divided and Scott ends up taking on the powers of the Phoenix Force, fighting the Avengers and taking out Xavier, resulting in him being imprisoned. Number 2, Magneto. Making his first appearance in X-Men 1 back in 1963, Magneto is a mutant with the ability to generate and control magnetic fields. He's a master of magnetism. He was a close friend with Professor X, but of course they came to a disagreement over the idea that humans and mutants could coexist peacefully. Like I just mentioned, he was a fan of when they got divided. He gave Scott Summers props for doing this, so he's clearly on board with this idea. And obviously his horrible childhood makes a fair point for said argument. He always believed that mutants were superior to humans. He was the one who created the Brotherhood of Mutants and the Acolytes. He worked with the X-Men before. See, when Professor X needed to leave Earth, Magneto stepped in to take his place and teach his students how to use their powers. After this, he became a hero in a way. He was guiding these new mutants. But again, he's one of those villains that constantly flips back and forth in the comics, and I'm really hoping he somehow is the one responsible for all this madness in WandaVision. After all, now that Quicksilver is somehow in the picture from the Fox universe, one can only hope we'll see some more X-Men, and one can only wish that Magneto will come through and maybe give his daughter a little talking to. And finally, number 1, Jean Grey. The Dark Phoenix, of course, she is number 1. Jean Grey is an Omega level mutant born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. She was also one of the OG members of the X-Men. Now, seeing the potential in Jean's strength, the Phoenix Force attached itself to her while she was in danger during a space mission with the Fantastic Four. It's X-Men 101. Like literally, the issue is X-Men 101. Dark Phoenix has now entered the chat. Uh-oh. So much power. Okay, this dark, powerful cosmic force started to change her for the worse. She ended up destroying a solar system, that, you know, kind of killed billions. And then she took her own life in order to keep the universe safe. Now, a few years later, it was revealed that it wasn't actually the Jean Grey that had died. No, just the Phoenix as a separate entity that had taken over her mind and all that jazz. The Phoenix Saga is one of the biggest transformations to an X-Men member, and we even got to see all this go down on screen. Now, of course, we'd have to put her at number 1. Number 10, Thunderbird. AKA John Proudstar, Thunderbird made his comic book debut in Giant Size X-Men issue 1, and during his childhood on the Apache Reservation in Camp Verde, Arizona, John wasn't like the other kids on the reservation. He grew up extremely strong, and he became an athlete, and at just the age of 20, his mutant powers manifested when he wrestled a charging bison with his bare hands. That's a lot of strength. Now, this earned him fame on the reservation, so much so that Charles Xavier caught wind of the young man through Cerebro and invited him to join the X-Men. The first mission John took was actually the rescue of the original X-Men from Krakoa. Xavier then gave him the nickname Thunderbird. Now, Apocalypse experimented on Thunderbird and transformed him into the Horseman of War at one point. Now, fortunately, this didn't last forever as he broke free of Apocalypse's mind control and began getting his life back together. You can find all this in Exiles issue 1. And before we go on to number 9, guys, if you haven't already, you can go ahead and give this video a thumbs up. It really does help our studio out a lot. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for supporting Top 10 Nerd. Now back to this list. Number 9, Wither. Making his first appearance in New Mutants Volume 2, Issue 3, Wither, aka Kevin Ford, grew up thinking he was cursed, or he was the most unlucky person on the planet. His mutant powers started to manifest, and he noticed it first in his plants and then on his clothes. See, his plants would die and his clothes would start to fade away. They would start to decay, almost wither away. Now we get it. Now, his father tried to calm him down once he realized this, but coming into contact with Kevin, well, you could have guessed what happens. He was soon discovered and was invited to join Xavier's Institute to learn how to control his wild powers of organic decay. He got close with Wallflower, aka Lori Collins, but in the House of M storyline, he touched her arm and crippled her. He ran away hurt and was soon met by Selene, the Black Queen, and she invited Wither to join her circle, and he gladly accepted. Number 8. Polaris. She's a powerful mutant who came to control magnetism, and she made her first appearance in X-Men 49 as Lorna Dane. But then in issue 97, she was Polaris. Cerebro identified her as a mutant when she stepped out of the shower and had green hair. So Iceman had a crush on her when she was part of the team, but she was in love with Havoc. Her powers are of course similar to Magneto's, but she lost them after the M-Day event as well. So when Apocalypse came into the picture, he also restored her powers as she was deemed the Horseman Pestilence. She was saved by her lover man Havoc and was also healed of Apocalypse's mind control. So again, didn't last too long, but definitely did see enough dark days. Number 7, Glob Herman. Glob Herman, aka Robert Herman, made his debut in New X-Men issue 117, and he grew up with a father who despised mutants a lot. So already we're off to a promising start. So when Glob mutated, his father was just not having it. So much so that his mother drove out Glob to Westchester and left him for Professor X. See, this mutation was interesting. His skin was this transparent living wax, which he's able to maintain being on fire, which is kind of cool. He runs with the New Mutants now, but at one point he did join the Omega Gang, led by Kid Omega, and they made their own stand for mutant rights. See, Glob wasn't a fan of the school, and he also had a grudge by the way that his father treated him. So he had a pretty harsh take on how to treat humans. Poor Glob, I mean, he had a rough childhood, not exactly his fault here at all. Number 6, Kid Omega. Okay, that guy that I just mentioned, of course, I'll fill you in a little bit on him as well and what gang that he was a part of. Quintavious Quinton Quirinius made his first appearance in X-Men issue 134, and he has been described as one of the most powerful telepaths, one of the most strongest mutants ever besides Jean Grey. He was once the host of the Phoenix Force as well, so that should give you any indication. He was one of Xavier's prized pupils until he put together the Omega Gang, which was a gang that takes out humans for the crimes they committed against mutants. He even went to a tattoo shop to get him and the gang tattoos of an Omega symbol to put over top of the X-Men symbol. So they weren't playing around here. I mean, at least try wash off tattoos first. I mean, give it some thought, you know, those things are forever. Number 5, Banshee. Making his first appearance in X-Men issue 28, Sean Cassidy was born as the heir to the castle and estate of Cassidy Keep in Ireland. Professor Xavier asked him to join the X-Men at the same time as Thunderbird, and they both stayed as members of the new X-Men. He went on to train the new generation of X-Men and Generation X, but was killed during Deadly Genesis when he tried to stop the Blackbird from crashing when it was taken taken over. Banshee remained one of the unliving until the Apocalypse twins resurrected him using the Death Seed, thus becoming the Horseman of Death himself. Later on, he ended up in the custody of the X-Men when Beast thought it was best to put him in a coma until the healing of Death Seed energy is complete. Number 4. Jubilee. Making her first appearance in Uncanny X-Men issue 244, Jubilee, aka Jubilation Lee, first discovered her mutant powers of generating this blinding and explosive blast from her hands. She was discovered by Dazzler, Cyclops, Rogue, and Storm during a rescue at the mall. And when she followed the women through the portal, she ended up at the X-Men's temporary base in the Australian outback. So she stayed there hiding, and then when the Reavers captured Wolverine and took over their base, she borrowed the X-Men's clothes and made a suit for herself. So she went and rescued Wolverine and aided him back to health. She's already an X-Men, look at that, just like that. So Jubilee and Wolverine ended up becoming a good pair, working missions together, and then a vampire ended up infecting the area of Union Square and Curse of the Mutants, and Jubilee, being caught in the path of this infection, ended up becoming a vampire herself. And in perfect harmony, she in the story ends up infecting Wolverine during her bloodthirsty time. And he was coming back to rescue her as well when it all happened. She's kept in a holding cell where Wolverine is really the only X-Men saying that they should keep her alive. So rough times, rough times. Number 3, Tattoo. AKA Christine Korn, she made her first comic book debut in New X-Men issue 126. She's a student of the Xavier Institute, and she's known as Tattoo, well, because her mutation allows her to display messages or designs on her skin. And if that's not cool enough, she can phase through matter. So, coolest mutant ever, okay? She's also one of the Omega Gang members, and one time, her and the other members, led by Quentin Quire, started a riot at Xavier Institute during opening day celebrations. So Tattoo actually phased her hand into Cyclops' head, and then told him that if she became solid, he wouldn't survive to see the end of it. But then, Emma Frost reverted the trick by turning into Diamond, and then putting her hand into Tattoo's head to prevent her from taking out Cyclops. What a confusing sight to see. Superheroes are so cool. And at one point, she also attacked Beast and Wolverine, but she was being controlled by Cassandra Nova. So, number 2, Rachel Summers. She's the daughter of Scott Summers and Jean Grey in an alternate universe on Earth 811, and she makes her first appearance in X-Men 141, the Days of Future Past story. So she was born from the Phoenix Force merging with Jean, so she got the abilities of a telepath and of a telekinetic. She was raised at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters when she met Franklin Richards and became really close. Now one day the school was attacked by federal troops, and she was one of the only survivors. She was taken in by the crazy Ahab, where she was brainwashed and became the mutant Hound, where she used her psionic powers to hunt down other mutants. Her time as this horrible mutant hunter weighed heavy on her conscience afterwards. I mean, she even got her face marked up by these guys. It was just an all bad situation. And finally, number 1, Pyro. Pyro was once a student at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters, and in X2, we see him hanging out with Iceman and Rogue. By the end of the movie, he switches over to Magneto's side, facing off against Bobby. And in the comics, Simon Lasker makes his first appearance as Pyro in X-Men Gold, Volume 2, Issue 1, when Mesmero tricks him into believing he's Charles Xavier, and he joins the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So not good on screen, not good in the comic books. Still a cool character, just likes to dip into the dark side.